Comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar. Ching, ching, bling, bling. Got the chatter. You ain't talking money, then you're talking no matter. Bonus track, bonus track.
That'll cost you extra. See you later, sucker.
You know, the guy in the booth who's talking to you on a tiny little earphone, he's afraid the guys at network are going to tell him he's through if he lets the guy keep talking like I'm talking to you. Because the corporation's got the networks and they get to say who gets to talk about the country and who's crazy today. I would cut to a commercial if you still want this job. Because you may not be back tomorrow with this corporate mob. Cut to a commercial.
Okay, flush him.
Cut the commercial. Cut the commercial. Cut the commercial. Cut the commercial. Okay.
What do you do to relax? By the way, you seem a little tense.
Drugs. No, that's not true.
That was only a joke, wasn't it? Tell the folks it was just a joke.
that was.
It was just a joke.
That was just a joke.
Yeah.
How would you describe yourself?
There's nothing. There's no self.
How would you like to be remembered?
Doesn't matter.
What were your dreams as a child?
Nightmares.
Hello and welcome to this very, very special edition of Overlapping Dialogue. It's the heart of Tinseltown. One of the biggest nights in LA.
I mean,
Lenore area. Which
yeah.
I independently thought to say that.
Right.
But I don't know why we've not done this before in our podcast history.
We should say what it is. It's our first annual Harry Dean Awards. Named, of course, after Harry Dean Stanton, as you've heard in the intro already.
Yeah.
But, as you go on.
Well, I was just going to say, we've never really done a bonus best of kind of end of the year episode. By the time you'll be hearing this, of course, it'll already
Probably because those usually suck.
2024. Yeah, and we'll talk about kind of our ideas about best of stuff later. But what better way to not only cap off 2023, but begin 2024 with a little bit of discussion on some of the movies that really captured our attention, mostly in good, maybe not sometimes not so good ways, but we're here to celebrate movies more so than not because we love movies.
Well, and it should be said, yes, a beginning because this is being recorded on New Year's Day. Mm-hmm. So,
as the U2 song once said.
I was hoping that I could find, I was looking here, a cursory glance to see if I could find the moment from Billions where it opens with New Year's Day, and Paul Giamatti literally says, on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
But I wasn't looking there. I wasn't finding it there. I was looking, but it was like, he went out to look for America and couldn't find it anywhere. Mm-hmm. Or as the Simon and Garfunkel song, one of their worst songs, I think, actually likes to say is, look for America. It's like, no, stop that song, now. Well, I'm glad somebody does.
Well, plenty of people do.
Yeah, I'm sure they do, but... Oh, and I love them, by the way. I'm just saying, no.
So we're going to celebrate...
It's no me and Julio down by the schoolyard, but that is a Paul Simon song. But anyway.
We're moving on. We are going to anoint a Filmmaker of the Year and Film of the Year. But I don't know. I think I can speak for Levi when I say we kind of took a lot of delight in creating a lot of these categories kind of out of thin air. Some of them make a lot of sense.
If you don't like it, then turn off the freaking podcast.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting this for free. I mean,
I don't know what your problem is.
Now, if you are one of Tinseltown's elite and you're listening to this podcast wondering, oh, am I going to get the Harry Dean? Well, not so fast. You've got to wait. Sit down. But again, we will be giving out these Harry Dean Awards to the very best, brightest, most celebrated.
Did you just say that just because you just finished The Best and the Brightest by David Halberstam?
I actually was not thinking about that, but
well, now you are.
Good book.
Sorry to be so. I don't want to be so adversarial already, but I'm
kind of what you're into.
I'm entering my journalist probing question era this year. I think because
is that your New Year's
because I'm going on that smear campaign, so I need to.
Yeah. One of me and Levi's New Year's resolutions was to enact a smear campaign against someone.
We have all year to
please
do
email
it.
us.
We have all year to do it, and a smear campaign can happen within 1 month, I think, effectively. I think we could wait until December of next year if we had to. So.
Does it have anything to do with the general election coming up this year?
No, I think that's just,
kind of stirring
once
the pot
again,
for you.
like you weren't thinking about The Best and the Brightest, I was not thinking about the general election when I decided to enact my smear campaign.
Yep.
Mainly that came from The Gilded Age. The show, not the era. Although it's about the same thing.
I'm really looking forward genuinely to a lot of things about 2024 coming up. This election, the election never stopped back in 2020. In a roundabout way, it's been going on every day since, and I feel like we're now living in an era, really since the days of 2016, in perpetual elections, which seem like they never end.
Mainly just because people are children and can't move on past a loss. I think we know who we're talking about. But anyway.
Speaking of children, we're going to dive into
very quick Blue Plate Special.
Blue Plate Special.
Hi, Audrey. Norma. Have a cup of coffee, please. Sure.
I'll have what she's having.
Hey, who wants a large pepperoni? Coming up!
This is a real run and gun. Oh, sorry, excuse me. This is a real run and gun Blue Plate Special right here.
One of the big
because we gotta get going.
Christmas releases this year was Wonka, which I'm not exactly
sure
how
Willy became Wonka.
I'm not exactly sure how this movie's done financially. I would imagine it's done well. Musical fantasy film directed by Paul King, who of course did all the Paddington movies.
Paul Motherfucking King, yeah.
So it had a budget of $125 million and it grossed $387 million.
Pretty good.
Seems like, there was
a little low though.
There was the Aquaman 2 that came out. I think that's kind of, I don't know if it's been a massive flop on the level of like The Flash, but I think
it's flop. You get it because fish,
Right. I get
flip,
it.
flop,
I get it.
like a bunny.
A flippity flop.
Hip, hop, hopper.
Well, yeah, so
Taxi driver quote.
The budget of Aquaman was between 205 to 215, and it's grossed 258 million.
That's not good.
Yeah, that's not good.
And
well,
it is good actually.
Singled that out as the end of the DCEU, and this has been one unambiguously good thing about 2023 is it's seen a receding of the comic book movie as a staple of Hollywood.
Yeah, now, and we'll come back to that later. But one thing I did want to say before we start talking about Wonka. I actually sent, and I'll go ahead and say this because it's too good. I came up with this on my own. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I sent in a.
You're welcome.
Well, whatever. I sent a Christmas gift to one of my friends from college, and I sent him Targets, the Pierre Bogdanovich film on Criterion, and because I hadn't seen it, I don't believe, and. In the card I sent with him, I said, "Hope you like this movie, and that it'll, get you past the DCEU ending." Jokingly, and they sent me a text back and said, "Yeah, I'm gonna need that, thanks." But yeah, so Targets can get you through that news.
But how Willie became Wonka?
Movie. But how? And speaking of, was Wonka even a good movie, Kyle?
Yes,
yeah,
I would say it was. One thing I liked about this movie going in is that for me, it was what it was. There was not these big. Yeah. I'm sure Warner Brothers would love to turn this into like a franchise extension, but going into it, especially after
Wonka became family.
We're going to talk about Barbie a little bit later on here. It felt like in the vein of that, although Barbie's more complicated because there's a lot of politics and
It's
things
meta,
assign
too.
and
Yeah.
meta nature with that, so that's a little different.
Right.
But one thing both movies have in
similar.
common: they're both light, they're both fun, they're both colorful, they're both unambiguously just big studio movies. You know, and again, Wonka isn't belabored by some of the things Barbie has to deal with in terms of what it was. It does have to deal with somebody taking over that role. I know. For us, obviously, Gene Wilder was kind of the one and only Wonka. There was the Jonathan Depp version that came out years ago that, as fans of Tim Burton, don't really mean anything to us.
Can I speak about that movie real quickly? Because there's something that I think about all the time that really has a stranglehold on my mind, like the Ted Nugent song.
Yeah.
Not Cat Scratch Fever, not that one.
Read the lyrics to that, by the way.
But is that in that movie, the reason that Jonathan Depp's Willy Wonka, because I forget that movie's called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
Oh, it's accurate. In quotes. The reason that he's been disowned by his father, played by Christopher Lee, is because his father was a dentist.
Yeah.
And he's like, I just can't have a son that eats chocolate all the time and has bad teeth. And it's like, that's literally a plot point in that movie. But anyway, so Timmy Tim as my son as Willy Wonka, thought was good. I mean, as good as it can be. Like I said, it's a lot to live up to that Gene Wilder.
To what extent do you think it was its own thing, or it was this facsimile of trying to be Gene Wilder?
I felt like it was mostly its own thing. I didn't personally feel like it was too Gene Wilder. I mean, the parts where it became a little too Gene Wilder is where he used the little flute, or like some of his scenes with the Hugh Grant.
I really liked actually I don't really care for Hugh Grant in general, but I actually liked the Hugh Grant scenes as and that was actually not even in the movie all that much.
No, there were like probably 4 scenes of that. Maybe.
Yeah.
I thought that was really funny. Like I said, I'm not a Hugh Grant fan either, especially when I learned he's a Fulham FC fan. But I don't care. I don't really care about Fulham. But I mean, I like those scenes. And I don't know. It's weird to say this, but it's like you see that thing, you want to pick it up and like hug it. It's so cute. It's weird. Yeah. Like there's things like that normally don't satisfy that urge for me that they do for other people, like Grogu or something. Right. Like stuff that's like, oh, it's cuddly and cute. Like, but like to see a little Hugh Grant like Oompa Loompa to me felt like, oh, that's kind of cute and funny. Like so yeah, I like that. But some of those scenes, it felt a little. It wasn't that it felt like he was doing Gene Wilder in those scenes. It just reminded me a lot more of that than some of the other scenes did because of the visual similarity to that design,
Where do you think, too, this for Chalamet fits into his evolution as a movie star, kind of an A-list movie star? Obviously, I think for a lot, he's been coming up for the last so many years. Dune was kind of a big moment for him in terms of leading a movie like that, and the second one's coming out this year.
And they're still trying to make Dune Messiah, people. There's been more news on that, and I laugh every time I see it.
What I like for me about it, just to answer my own question, I guess, is just that this offered a very light version of him, because a lot of the movies he's been in, he's kind of either been dark and serious, even in something like Lady Bird, which is ostensibly comedic, has this kind of dark character.
Or even Call Me By Your Name is very serious, even though he's a very light character in that. It's very serious about what is his life and who is he and his identity.
But wouldn't you agree that this speaks well of his range to do something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going the Leonardo DiCaprio route, it seems, where...
But he's been told, he's mentored by him, apparently, to not do comic book movies, basically.
Well, and what I mean by that is, it's like, that's not to say that Leonardo DiCaprio won't do a paycheck movie sometimes, or he won't do a bigger movie.
But DiCaprio's version of a paycheck movie is Inception.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So even with something that is more mainstream in a pop movie and kind of in franchise territory... He's doing Willy Wonka. He's not doing like The Flash or something, like something you'd expect.
That does inherently give you a lot more latitude of a performance than putting on a costume. I mean, he is putting on a costume, but it's not like covering his face. It's very
what's funny is that for cinephiles and audiophiles, him doing Bob Dylan will be its own version of doing that superhero movie in its own way.
Yeah, prestige version.
Right, and it'll be like what I will like to know is when he and Bob Dylan meet, what that situation will be like. Like, what's the conversation going to be, Or will they meet at all?
We talked about this back when Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny came out, which is probably, we didn't even award that any awards,
Well,
just
no,
spoiler
because,
alert,
yeah.
probably the most forgotten film of 2023.
Because even The Flash has been talked about more than that in terms of it being that much of a disaster.
But James Mangold's lost a lot of stock for a lot of people. I mean, I wouldn't even say he did. I mean, maybe a little bit, but not like as much as for me as other people. After that, and I think we even mentioned that back when we were talking about it. But it's going to be interesting to see how he fits into that too, in terms of his reputation and.
Well, that fits more in line with like Walk the Line or
I mean, people forget how fun Ford versus Ferrari
Yeah.
was. That was one of the most flat out entertaining movies.
I saw somebody
of the last so many
tweeted
years.
something. Somebody tweeted something here last month or so. They said something like they tweeted a poster of that movie and they said proof that racing movies just can't be interesting or something, or you can't make racing interesting. I'm like, what? Like,
That's
what
like
are you
the
talking about?
opposite.
Like, that's just insane to me. I mean,
Like if you told me, like, do you want to watch Ferrari for the first time or Ford versus Ferrari for the second time?
or you just want to go watch Grand Prix, even like, that's. I mean I don't find racing that particularly interesting either, in the sense that, and I know, believe me, I've grown up in a culture of NASCAR,
We lived in
like
Western North Carolina,
where
Southeast
that's
United States our whole lives. So
tangentially interesting.
yeah,
I feel about that the way that Ira Kaplan of Yola Tango once said. He's like, I mean, we all like barbecue and NASCAR potentially, as he said. I won't go into the details of what that was, but spoiler, it was used in one. Can you believe this, by the way, that a Yola Tango song was used in a NASCAR commercial that then went along with George Bush saying, "Gentlemen, start your engines," and he was mad about that because it's George Bush. But anyway, so like that's what I'm saying. It's like, I'm tangentially interested in actual racing, but I think movies made about racing automatically make it more interesting than the actual thing. But anyway, whatever. Wonka. I thought it was fine. I mean, it like I said, it was colorful and it was big and it had a lot of all these big characters.
It framed,
in it,
Wonka as this like upstart, revolutionary candy maker against this monopoly.
Do you want it white, nougat, nutty, totally insane, whatever all that was. Yeah,
right. But again, I think the biggest takeaway from this movie, we're gonna probably forget about it and move on with our lives. But that it does show Chalamet has the potential to do things that are lighter and more fun, or
at least it wasn't a shot down in flames disaster.
Right.
Either,
I think. Well, again, just for the fact that we went to go see some more heavy holiday movies, which we quite like better than Wonka. But it is good. Just there is something, as a cinephile, that's good about going around Christmas time to go see a movie with family, as we did. That's pretty light, not offensively bad, just fine. And and colorful to look at, and it might sound dumb,
laughed a lot during it. I'll say that. I thought it was very funny. I mean, like, genuinely, and that's partly because they had the right actors in place to accomplish that. With Keegan-Michael Key was in it, and then
as the inspector,
and he got fatter as the movie went on. Yeah. That was kind of like okay. And those three villains, one of which was the guy that was on The Leftovers. Can't remember his name. And then I did think the stuff with, I don't know how you felt about the Olivia Colman stuff in the
Patterson
movie.
Joseph was that guy's Arthur Slugworth.
Yeah. I don't know how you felt about the stuff with Olivia Colman and the other guy in the movie. I thought that was pretty funny just because it was so weird.
Yeah, I actually did like that stuff too. I thought that was funny.
I mean, it was a fine movie, whatever.
Is Roald Dahl having a moment? I think we mentioned that a while back.
Well, what surprised me, I had assumed for a long time this was going to be a Netflix movie due to that big Netflix deal with the Roald Dahl estate and all those other movies.
Turned into the Wes Anderson shorts.
Right. But I think they're planning on doing more with that.
Yeah.
But I just thought this was strange that, I guess it's because Warner Brothers owns Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and they were using some of the... Oh, I forgot Rowan Atkinson was in this too, yeah.
As Father Julius, a corrupt, chocolate-addicted priest in league with the chocolate cartel.
Yeah.
I mean, in a good way, this feels like like you playing Candyland with your friends and just making up all kinds of random...
Like, Rowan Atkinson's in this as a chocolate addict priest who, keeps the Chocolate Factory below his convent. But, yeah. Anyway. This is fine. Whatever.
A much more headier movie we actually...
Well, it's funny you say headier because it's talking about people who have massive brain damage, probably, but yeah.
We saw a double feature a few days ago in Asheville of Poor Things and The Iron Claw. Now, we're going to talk about Poor Things a little later, so we'll kind of table that for now. But The Iron
spoiler
Claw...
about a possible thing.
Harry Dean's coming its way.
Dean, yeah.
So if you worked on Poor Things at all, take a sigh of relief. A Harry Dean is coming your way.
Lanthimos, put down the gun. But yeah. I'm sorry to make
Claw,
this joke, but we needed
to...
Yeah, well, you said it for me. Lord. Yeah.
So I'm a pro wrestling fan. I was into it back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I've gotten back into it again in 2023, which has been very enjoyable for me. But I think I was vaguely aware of who the Von Erichs were. I'd heard that name, but I was not intimately familiar with the details of this story. And
I knew everybody else around them, basically, except for them, mostly. But
yeah, because they were in the NWA pipeline, along with like Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, Harley Race, a lot of names that are even more familiar with most people, especially Ric Flair. This is directed by Sean Durkin, who directed Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, which was a huge independent movie that came out, hard to believe, over 10 years ago now. About basically this Von Erich family and how their father was a former kind of wrestling star who pushed them into the business, and one of their signature moves was the Iron Claw, which was basically just this like claw to the head, like a submission move, basically.
What's funny is I assumed that wouldn't really do much of anything, and then he really did it to Ric Flair at that one point. I was like, wow.
Yeah. What did you think of the Iron Claw as kind of a prestige movie that's coming out here at the end of the year?
Good Lord. It's if you want to be in a good mood, don't go see this movie. I don't know. I mean, it was good. I don't want to belabor this of like, oh my God, this was so sad the whole time. Really well made.
Yeah.
I think though maybe part of the problem is, and I don't know how you feel about this and I'm a tangential wrestling fan. I'm not a big wrestling fan or anything, but I do like wrestling. But if you go, I don't know, if you really think about it, I feel to me that this movie's maybe a little too prestige-y for wrestling. Don't you feel like every wrestling movie that's made takes it too seriously? Yeah. Like The Wrestler, I haven't seen, believe it or not, but movies like that, it's like, this is serious stuff. This is a squared circle.
I think one of the more transgressive things
as hell.
I would think one of the more transgressive things to do is to mix that with the ultra absurd and funny. That's what's being performed on the outside, and that like go between or that dichotomy, I think, would make a much more interesting movie sometimes than these very serious, soul-searching movies, which, again, I actually think a lot of The Wrestler and Mickey Rourke's performance, I'd say that's a little better than this, but it's very true that they take it very, very seriously. Something like Ready to Rumble, which I'd love us to watch at some point, which was kind of made in the later days of WCW, is obviously this much more broad, conventional kind of comedy that celebrates the wackiness of it, I think, a little more so. And so I would like something that's in the middle of those extremes,
or even mixing those like old, even this is random, but those old like luchador movies of Mexico, like that kind of like level of. That's more because those movies, from what I understand, I'd actually like to watch through all those because that seems fascinating to me, and I just want to watch more Latin American cinema in general. But with those movies, it seems like it's like, oh, there's a wrestler, a luchador, but then he fights these like big they're almost like kaiju movies or something, like, and it takes that level of like this staunch, ridiculous heroism, and I'm saying even in this sense of this very lofty idea of these are heroes, but also it's like literally fighting like a big lizard or something, like, and I'm not saying that's what this wrestling movie should be. I'm just saying like that I know how a lot of and I think part of it is because wrestling for so long was seen as just, the goofiness and people were fighting it and whatever. And then they're like, but what is it actually, what's the physical toll, what's the emotional toll on these people? I get that. I mean, we're seeing that more with American football now too, and sports in general, is that like the emotional toll as well as the physical toll and the intersection of the two. But I feel like we've seen that a lot recently. So for me, and I don't know. I mean, this story, I don't know. You can't tell it goofily because in case you didn't know, most of this family died of these like really horrible circumstances, either of like medical issues or outright suicide. I think it was 5 out of the 6 brothers died. Literally, only Kevin Von Erich, the Zac Efron character, lived. So
then there was a whole other brother that was in no way depicted in the movie
that committed suicide. Yeah, in the early 90s. And then they had that brother that was killed as a child in an accident. So it's just a really sad story in a lot of ways.
So you're saying that you can't do that with this, but in general, it would be nice to have.
Right, and I'm not saying that with this movie. This just acts as an example of how seriously wrestling is taken by filmmakers.
Do you think it's a way for them to a little bit like apologize for in any way liking or depicting this world? I feel like some way it implicitly is.
Right, and I'm fine with... Now, I haven't seen The Wrestler yet, but I'm fine with that being the movie that does that because it's a Darren Aronofsky movie and he's going to do that. And Mickey Rourke... And I think that's also a... And this is all from having not seen the movie. I think that's also a good way to kind of metatextually remark upon Mickey Rourke's career and be what have you done with yourself?
I mean, no one else could have played that role at that time.
And so that makes sense. And this does too, but I'm saying, like, it seems to me that you're either going to get a WWE Studios movie, which is trash, or you're going to get this, which is taking itself way too seriously. It's filming... Like, I don't know, you see, like, you think about the scene, for example, with the Ric Flair guy in the movie, and there's the scene where he's doing the shoot promo, and he's, like, so serious, and it's like, he is, or even the Harley race scene where he's doing that, and it's like all this important music, and it's like they're going up against the big boys.
Yeah.
It's like,
but then you actually pay attention to what they're saying, especially the Ric Flair stuff.
Either that, or you just watch old clips of what that really was. It was the goofiest thing ever. And they're like, whoa, like, and so that's what I'm saying. There's a divorce between reality and this fictionalized reality here, or like seen as this seriousness.
Wouldn't you agree though too that like some of that wackiness is so brilliant and great in its own right that it would almost be at the same time a moot point to depict some of that. Like, go watch an old Dusty Rhodes promo, and that's nothing's going to top that in terms of pure entertainment value at the same time too. I would agree though generally that we need to, in depicting this world, be a little more loose and
because there's that idea they're going to make that Todd Phillips is going to make that Hulk Hogan. Well, we don't know. We were talking about that. We don't know what the deal is there.
Chris Hemsworth. And I saw an interview a while back with Chris Van Vliet, who interviews a lot of people in the world of pro wrestling. He's got a podcast. He actually asked Hulk Hogan about this over the last few months, maybe a month or two ago, and he asked him about it as recently as then, and said Chris Hemsworth's passionate about it and wants to do it. It's just a matter of time and if or when it could happen.
Yeah.
But
well, that's also because he's making that Joker movie too. The Todd
that in of itself would be a reflection of Chris Hemsworth in terms of he's been a little open in the last few years about the physical toll he's had to take to do these Marvel movies and Thor, and so that would in of itself be a meta textual thing for him to explore, is like the life of Hulk Hogan,
Right, but then that's also maybe the problem of what was wrong with Joker. What I'm about to say is I want that movie. Well, in theory, I would want that movie to be more goofy than this and like. Not take Hulk Hogan too seriously, because he's a walking like caricature of himself. I mean, and I know there, and especially later in his life, I know there was a lot of. I know he had a suicide ideation thing, and there was all that. And I'm not saying discount that, but I'm saying in that time period, though, it's like if you're going to do the Hulk Hogan movie, like you're gonna be fighting people like Randy Savage or even somebody as like, hyperbolically big as Andre the Giant, and to me, doing that seriously is impossible. That's in my mind of like you can't just have Randy Savage come into a movie and be like blah, 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 and just then be like. Oh yeah, okay.
No, but this.
Yeah, right. Or brother, and just because I don't want to. Because also Hulk Hogan was like that too. I mean, he was nuts. Like so, that's what I'm saying is like those movies need to be, I think, more tinged in that comic book direction, frankly. Mm-hmm. And I mean like comic booky and like comic booky, not like the Marvel comic book version of that.
Like a Sam Raimi.
Right.
Like,
well, because Sam Raimi got that in the sense of having Randy Savage.
What are you doing up there? Yeah. Bonesaw McGraw.
Yeah. Staying away from you. But yeah, that's on. So
well, one thing we do have to remember about Hulk Hogan is he is the real American. Fights for the rights of every man. He is the real American. Fight for what's right.
Fight for your life. It's like
no, I had not heard some of that in a while before I rewatched some old matches from the 80s, and that just came back to me as one of the most friggin' corny things ever.
The best part's fight for your life. It's like, but anyway, back to the Iron Claw. A couple good things I have to say about it. I thought Zac Efron was actually really good in this. One of his better roles. Yeah. And I feel like he's been getting there slowly over time. He hasn't gotten there like Robert Pattinson or Kristen Stewart have, but he's getting there, I think, to where he could be that. And that's one of the only better things I've said about him. I thought everybody else was fine.
Jeremy Allen White was good. I actually really liked, I've not really seen him in anything else, but Harris Dickinson as David Von Erich.
British, I think.
I thought he was really good.
Yeah.
The father we're big fans of
Holt
is
McElhaney.
Holt McElhaney, who's terrific in Mindhunter.
He's in a lot
TV
of
show.
he's in like Fight Club. He's in a lot of random David Fincher movies.
Yeah.
Right.
He's been one of those guys. He's in Gangsta Squad.
I forgot he was in that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, he's just. I think this is his best role he's been able to play.
Yeah.
He was other than like Mindhunter, which is kind of in another category, but. Yeah, I mean, really, the performances in this was the best thing about it, I'd say, overall.
Yeah. And I feel like it was a really good... what I liked about the movie, too, is what I call the prestige Texan. It's like these like Texas wrestlers, but then, everything... They kind of live on a ranch, and they kind of are... well-to-do, sort of, and, like, I found that as an interesting marriage between styles I wasn't expecting, and I thought, and the movie looks really good. I really love the way it looks, and its depiction of the 80s and what the late 70s into the 80s, but, like, so those things are good. It's just, and the story ultimately is fascinating in the sense that it actually happened, but I don't know, there was just something about it that didn't really ring true to me in a way either.
It did have Chavo Guerrero. Yeah. Apparently, he choreographed all the wrestling scenes, which were good.
Best thing he ever did.
Other than get choke slammed by Kane at WrestleMania and lose instantly. But again, I did overall like this movie. But I would agree that I would be a lot more interested in a little bit of a different depiction of this world.
Yeah.
But again, but as we said, it's hard to do this any other way with this particular story.
Right.
So,
yeah, I get it.
The Delinquents, Levi wanted to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention this briefly because I watched it when I had the flu 2 weeks ago. This is a movie that came out as an Argentine movie by Rodrigo Moreno. I watched it on Mubi. It's a 3-hour and 10-minute movie. And by the way, the tagline is "Get your life back," and I'm like, I don't know that I can after this movie.
Yeah,
a really fascinating movie. I'd recommend to anybody who is interested in, over 3-hour long foreign films. Which, like, there's a lot of people that are going to be listening to this that would be, but I'm saying anybody who. That's a tall order for most people, obviously.
Yeah.
That is sort of about a bank robbery. And because people working at this bank in Buenos Aires, and one of them decides to rob the bank and then hide the money and turn himself in, and then literally he'll not give up the money, and he'll be in there for, I think it's 3 years, 3.5 years on good behavior or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'll get out and take the money, and then basically the idea is I'll make the same amount if I ration it out working for 25 years if I would have worked 25 years at this job, it would be the same amount of money, blah, blah, blah. He says he'll also, if this other guy that works there helps him take care of the money and hide it, he'll give him some of it or something.
Yep.
And so it sounds like a pretty basic idea, and it's like, okay, very low-key, unassuming movie in so many ways, very slow-moving, doesn't really make a lot of itself. It's just kind of like whatever. It's kind of a two-part movie in a certain way, in the sense that they like have part of it. The first part's more about that stuff, and then the second part just becomes about not totally other characters. The same characters are in it, but all these other characters are introduced, and it's like a whole thing with that. And I won't go on and on about the movie because you haven't seen it either, so I can't bounce ideas off somebody about it. But just a really weird, thought-provoking movie, just very strange in a lot of ways. And like, for example, one of the and that the metaphor of the movie is freedom, and like, what is freedom and how can you attain freedom, and is freedom even real as an idea? And like one of the very basic ways it does that I think is funny is that the bank manager is played by this actor, this older guy. And then when he's in jail, like the kind of kingpin in the jail is played by the same actor. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is you're going to be bossed around by somebody no matter what you do. You know, the idea of Bob Dylan said you got to serve somebody. Mm-hmm. So I just think that's a funny, like, idea. And then to kind of spoil it a little bit, both characters fall in love with the same woman near where they hide the money at, and unknowingly don't even know that happens. Like, the guy that was in jail fell in love with her over a few days before he turned himself in, and then the other guy did afterwards, and they don't know that. And so there's this whole idea of, like, intersecting fates, and it's very interesting. I mean, it's kind of a funny movie. It's kind of a dark comedy sort of, but it's like very dry, funny. Yeah. I mean, it's stuff like the movie starts and like the second main character is introduced, and he just has this like really big like neck brace on, and he's just walking around in the bank with a neck brace, and it's just funny visually, but it's kind of like, and then that becomes a plot point of an alibi thing. It's a long story, but anyway. Movie was pretty good, but just I wanted to mention it because it is in my top 10 of the year towards the bottom, which we'll talk about what we thought about this year in general anyway. But it's a really weird, interesting movie in general that I'll be thinking a lot about. So,
good deal.
Yeah.
Definitely want to try to check that out. How did you see it again? You
said
Mubi.
Yeah. I was going to get rid of Mubi. I should tell that story too. I was going to get rid of it because I only really got it to watch The Kingdom, the Lars von Trier show, which I finally watched all of.
Yeah.
And then I was going to get rid of it, and they were like, oh, we'll slash the price in half. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, for a year.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, fine. And I kept it, so.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Sometimes you about want to laugh how desperate they are to keep you for stuff like that, because I've seen that with other subscriptions I've had. It's
right,
like,
and that is one thing, like, how much am I going to use this? But at the same time, there's going to be those certain random foreign films that get put up on there that you can't see anywhere else.
Yeah.
So, that's important. And also, I kind of feel bad. I'm like, nah, I'll give money to this. It's almost like a charity thing, So,
sure.
Yeah.
Before we get into our first annual Harry Dean Awards, we want to give a special in memoriam segment to one Tom Wilkinson, who just passed away on December 30th. Mm-hmm. One of those actors that if you saw his name on anything, Tom Wilkinson's in this. That's just instantly kind of a pick-me-up.
We're instituting Hell Yeah protocol kind of deal,
Some of the movies he's known for, and we'll go...
The Patriot.
Circle back to this. The Patriot is one of them. I think he plays General Cornwallis in that.
Yeah, he did.
I just want to just recheck that again, because that's my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, so General Cornwallis. That's not one of the first things I immediately think of, but Michael Clayton in The Name of the Father, Sense and Sensibility, Shakespeare in Love. Again, a lot of these kind of British / Merchant Ivory movies in the 90s. Girl with a Pearl Earring, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Minds, Rock and Rolla, Batman Begins, Valkyrie, one of Levi's faves, the Ghost Rider, Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, Belle, Selma, where he played Lyndon Baines Johnson, and Denial. Again,
he was also in The Bedroom, that Todd Field movie.
I also don't know if I mentioned, but John Adams, he plays Ben Franklin. Right. Apparently, he played Joe Kennedy in a little kind of small series called The Kennedys, which I was not very aware of.
Yeah, because I saw you looking at that a while ago, and I got kind of scared because I thought that was that Kennedy show they're going to make.
No.
And I was like, oh, crap, did he play somebody on that? They're going to have to recast it or something?
He played Joe Kennedy in this other show.
Yeah.
What comes to mind when you think of Tom Wilkinson?
Well, normally, you know what's funny is like one of the first things I think of normally is Michael Clayton, but because he's really great in that. Obviously, that whole movie's really great with a lot of great actors, except for Sidney Pollack, who happens to be in it.
Well, he's fine in the movie.
Yeah, but I just screw him though. Anyways, what I mean, like,
I mean, I'm pretty about Sidney Pollack. But
The Interpreter.
I wouldn't say
The
that
Interpreter,
about him, but...
best movie ever, right? The Interpreter.
Well,
The Interpreter.
3 Days of Condor is good.
That's true. Nah, whatever.
Jeremiah Johnson's pretty forgettable. I know a lot of people actually love that movie, but
Jeremiah Johnson. No. Yeah, but anyway, I mean, I want to see a lot more of his
episode or
movies.
2 of The Sopranos.
That's true. Whatever. I don't want to talk bad about Sidney Pollack. It's fine. But I'm gonna do it again. But no. I think randomly, this is so random, but him as Slughorn. But oh wait, he wasn't in.
Well, I was going to mention this too.
Half-Blood
when
Prince.
I first read Half-Blood Prince, I imagined him as Slughorn.
Yeah, right.
So in my head, there's this other performance he gave as Slughorn. He was brilliant.
And you've told me that, and I've always imagined that too. So.
He was just great. I think perfect for that. But the actor who did play him.
Oh crap! He's in all those Edgar Wright movies. Dang.
What's his name?
That makes me mad, and I can't think of it.
I'm gonna look it up.
God, that just pisses me off.
But he was good. Jim Broadbent.
Dadgummit, that's right. Yeah,
he was good. I mean, he was plenty good, but I just imagine Tom Wilkinson when I read.
But anyway,
the book.
and I think also of him in Mission Impossible. I think that's a very
Was Ghost Protocol was the one he was in?
Hell yeah, Protocol. Yeah.
Really terrific in Eternal Sunshine too, in a smaller role.
I don't remember him.
He's
in that,
the doctor who does the procedure.
Oh yeah. That's
and he did that to Kirsten Dunst, who works for him, who had fell in love with him in the past, and that's really good.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, he's one of those people that like he's in so many random things. I kind of can't think of a lot of them off the top of my head now, and I know you just listed a bunch, but I mean, he's just pretty much great in anything he'd show up in. And how old was he?
He was 75.
Grand Budapest Hotel is another thing I think of a lot. Him in that, I think.
He's the older Jude Law, right?
Right. Yeah. Not in the Lone Ranger.
I think we would agree though that Michael Clayton is his real big performance that is most going to be remembered for us. Of a certain generation.
You mentioned this, but him as LBJ and Selma, I think about.
I think he's pretty perfect actually as LBJ. Yeah. I wish he looked a little more like him, but everything else, the voice and his performance, I think is just terrific.
Because Tim Roth definitely looks like George Wallace.
I mean, he's got the accent, which is kind of funny, but that's not as.
Oh no, it's hilarious.
Yeah,
but
he's actually, I think, terrific as LBJ.
Yeah, but anyway, him and Michael Clayton.
Yeah, which he was nominated for an Academy Award for. I know he lost that year to Javier Bardem, who won for No Country, but he plays just like teetering on the brink of disaster at every moment. Crazy guy. With such gusto and such gravity,
which is not normally what he plays either.
Too. One of the best bits of acting from him is not even really video you see, but that audio you hear of Clooney listening to him have a mental breakdown, basically, and the audio of all that is just really terrific. And so he's one of those actors that you instantly saw pop up in anything, and you're Tom Wilkinson, love that guy.
Yeah,
he was really good as Ben Franklin too, and John Adams. I wish we would got more. A Ben Franklin miniseries or movie where he got to be as him even more.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you told me for years about that movie before I'd actually seen it, and that just in this random scene, he's like, "I'm Shiva, god of death,"
and then I look
George
like
Clooney's
him and George Clooney looking at each other,
and he just ignores it. He's like, "I'm not even going to deal with this." But.
So he was 75 years old. They gave a lot of great performances. I know they're going to be looked at fondly for many, many years to come. So Tom Wilkinson, you will be missed. Now, let me get it ready. Are you ready, Levi?
Yeah.
The first annual Harry Dean Stanton Awards.
Harry Dean Stanton Awards?
No, we're calling them the Harry Deans.
The Harry Dean Awards.
The Harry Dean Awards.
The overlapping dialogue Harry Dean Awards. There you go. We don't know what it's called.
Yeah, we're still working it
Actually,
out.
we do know what it's called. It's the overlapping dialogue Harry Dean Awards.
Yeah. So, our first one we're going to give out is actually for books, and actually going to be delivered in honor of one of our very favorite writers, who's an even more interesting, I think we should say, public speaker. Yes, you guessed it, James Ellroy.
I'm James Ellroy, the death dog with a hog log. My novel, The Black Dahlia, will be poorly filmed in March of next year by overrated auteur Brian De Palma, fatuously good-looking Josh Hartnett and Scarlett Johansson will weekly star in this vehicle. The production designer is Dante Ferretti, who production designed most of the great Scorsese movies, so it will look very good, and it will be shot by the esteemed Vilmo Zsigmond. I predict an intriguing flop. It will nevertheless sell me a shitload of books. I used to take the commuter train back from New York City to Westchester County late Friday night, and a lot of very nicely dressed, turned out stockbrokers would piss and shit in the stairwells. How many of you people are drug addicts? Raise your hand. Yeah. How many of you on methadone maintenance? How many of you shot up Big H this morning? That's heroin. How many of you smoke crack cocaine on a regular basis? Liars.
We're not sure what we picked there because there's so much to choose from, but we do not endorse anything he said. That's all I'm going to say.
There's a really great video on YouTube you should seek out. It's called, all caps, James Ellroy Unloads on Everyone in 2005 Book Tour.
All caps, like
a bunch of
like 10 exclamation points or something. Yeah.
What I love at the very beginning of this video, it says it is a short film.
Yeah, it's like I don't know that it has a story though exactly, but okay.
And I will say, funny enough, James Ellroy was a writer I read more of in 2023.
I'm reading LA Confidential right now, actually, while we're. So I'm in a
there's
overload.
Like every 30 minutes, Levi's like, "Hey, Kyle, come in here and listen to this," and then reads me a portion of it. And say, "Wow!"
But you're probably gonna read that book soon.
Yeah,
anyway,
I will be.
But,
I read Black Dahlia for the first time. I know you've read that in the past.
Yeah, I've read that years ago.
I really like that a lot. Even more, really like The Big Nowhere. Which
I've so far liked The Big Nowhere better than LA Confidential. I feel like LA Confidential is more or less the same book.
Okay.
And the same character structure and everything. It's just about different things, sort of. I mean, I think it's a lot more tied to The Big Nowhere than The Big Nowhere was to Black Dahlia, at least in memory.
I was really shocked in a good way how sensitively he handled a queer character in The Big Nowhere. Mm-hmm. I was like, wow, you actually written this with a good deal of sensitivity and interesting perspective. I was
in the 80s. He
right. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Was that the early 90s?
Might have been the
early 90s.
When was it?
Yeah, 1990, I think, actually.
But we're fans of James Ellroy. I know
1988.
88. Okay, it came out. Like detective fiction can get a little boring to me. And movies too can be.
I agree.
But I like his is as much about the world, obviously, and the setting as it is anything about the plot. Which his plots are labyrinth in nature sometimes, and I can have a tendency to get lost in them. But the world itself and his depiction of like 40s and 50s era Los Angeles is really terrific. Now,
and he did the same thing for the 60s as well. We haven't got to yet.
I'm really interested to read those books. Yeah.
Those are a lot more expressly political as well, as far as about Kennedy America and kind of Vietnam era America. And
which, again, I'm very intrigued to hear what his vision of that world is. But the Ellroy Award for Favorite Book of 2023. Now, this can be a book that came out in 2023, as Levi's going to do, or a book that we read in 2023 period, which is going to fall a little bit more into my category. But Levi, start us off. What is your favorite book you read in 2023?
You want to do the drum roll here?
Oh.
Yes.
And, sorry, we will leave this in, Yes. Well,
press the thing.
we're testing out here.
Technical difficulty. And the Harry Dean goes to... And I'm going first?
Yes.
Okay. The Shards by Bret Easton Ellis, which I've talked a great deal about earlier in the year. I'll keep it short and sweet.
Did you talk about it on the podcast?
Yeah, I did at some point.
Okay.
And I was going to write about it, but I didn't. I was going to write kind of a review, and I found that the book had enough to say on its own. But I can't think of a book I've been more surprised by, and you can speak to this too because you've read the book also.
Yeah, I'll get my thoughts here in a little bit.
That you feel more or less, I think, the same way I do. But because it sounds strange to say this, but I went in with a bulletproof vest on reading this book because when I think Bret Easton Ellis, I, of course, think of American Psycho, which I'm actually going to try to read at some point soon, the book. And I like to read many of his other books like Glamorama and Imperial Bedrooms and obviously Rules of Attraction and Less Than Zero, all his bigger books from years ago. But when I think of Bret Easton Ellis, I think of, American Psycho, the film.
Which by far is the book and movie adaptation of is the thing he'll most be remembered for, I think.
And I think about his kind of personality, which is very,
combative,
very kind of like the Quentin Tarantino of writers, I think, in a lot of ways.
And he came around in a contemporary way,
right?
In the late 80s, early 90s.
And so
they're buddies too, because I know Bret Easton Ellis got a podcast, and Tarantino's been on it several times.
Of course,
so they're buddies. Yeah.
So, and I just know his sensibility, and so I went in
before you'd even read a word of his books.
Yeah. And we'd even done the podcast on American Psycho before I read this book. I think,
and we did not. Last year. We don't care for the movie.
No, which you've heard that already. And so you think, okay, well, why did you want to read this book? Well, it was new, but also I saw what it was about, and I was like, that sounds so fascinating. I kind of have to read it. I saw how long it was. I saw it was his first book in many years as far as being a novel. I know he wrote that book, White, which was a bunch of essays, which you can tell by the title how controversial that is. And a lot of the things he said over the last so many years have been very controversial politically. He basically had to out himself as gay officially because of some homophobic things he kind of said. But then he wrote this book, which is low-key one of my favorite books I think I've ever read in general. I'm so fascinated by everything about this book. Like you said about Elroy, what I really love about this book the most is just living in the 1981 Los Angeles of the time, albeit through a, very, white bread privileged, boarding school kind of, well, not boarding school, but a private school kind of milieu. What was so fascinating about this book to me, though, was it was kind of everything you want in a book in a certain way. Of like, it's this very kind of trashy pulp novel about a serial killer and these sex crimes and murders that are going on. Kind of maybe about a cult, which that was something that never really came into the book fully, which I was kind of interested about. But it's also very much about Bret Easton Ellis, the person, because he's writing about himself as the main character is Bret Easton Ellis, who grew up in Los Angeles in the 1980s, who's going to become a novelist. And he's written autofiction before, as far as Glamorama and some of those older books I haven't yet read, but in Imperial Bedrooms as well. But that this book meant so much to me in the sense of reading somebody be so self-effacing of themselves and be very willing to admit, first of all, how much he didn't like, Reagan, the Reagan 80s and Reagan America, which he already talked about with, American Psycho very clearly, but he made that very clear. He also made it very clear how he actually felt kind of guilty about his privilege at the time and how he wanted nothing to do with that. I mean, of course, he wanted to be privileged in the sense that he could go to New York and become a writer, which is definitely its own privilege. A lot of writers wouldn't agree with that, I'm sure. But that's a very privileged state of being to be in as a writer in New York.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing he was really interested in. And then you make that entire book about him hiding his sexuality as a homosexual, man, and about what does that mean for his friends that he's around, which don't know that. There's his best friend in the book, a girl who's dating his other best friend who he kind of has a crush on.
Yeah.
And she kind of knows that, but otherwise everybody doesn't. And kind of him grappling with his sexuality. Then interspersed with this very violent and dark serial killer story
and this question of this kid who kind of drops from the clear blue sky that emerges into Robert Mallory's the character's name, and what relationship he has to these
that idea of him being sexually attracted to Robert Mallory, but also totally disgusted by him and kind of shunning him in a certain way. But then, and I use this as an example, I talked about it at the time when we talked about it, it's very much like Harry Potter in Half-Blood Prince, basically watching Draco Malfoy and like obsessed with what's Draco
stalking
doing.
Him in a Hitchcockian sense.
And the question becomes, okay, we know there's something weird about this person, and we know they might be doing something, but what does it say about you that you're so obsessed about this and you're like following this person? Now, this book leaves it much more questionable as to what actually, and this is kind of a spoiler about the book, I guess, but it's more questionable as to what Robert Mallory actually did or didn't do. And the book doesn't actually answer that fully, which I'm fascinated by in its own way. Yeah. And the book also tries to sort of implicate Brett by the end, which I took more as more of a metaphor than a literal, oh, he actually did something here and hid it from himself. I don't actually believe that, and I don't even know that Ellis believes that either. But that the ending to that book, especially the climax, I was just so riveted by. And I was reading it in the moment knowing what it meant, even seeing past the basic like thriller aspect of it of, wow, he's really doing this right now. Like that just really, it was a book in all ways that was a total surprise to me that I just totally loved in every way. Read very quickly. It's a long book. It's like 700 pages long or so. But it's a very fast read, and I just am totally in love with. So I'll let you speak to that briefly before you speak about.
I know Levi had been raving about this book from the very beginning of the year. That's when
I read it. I think February and March, something like that.
I had some reservations about reading him because I know what his reputation was, and funny enough, the writer I'm going to talk about has his own reputation of sorts too. But I was like, and I want to give it a chance. Levi liked it, and he's got great taste, so I'll see what this is. I loved it as well. It's definitely it would probably be my top 5 favorite books I read this year. Going into it knowing it was a serial killer story, that didn't really perk my interest. I don't really care more and more as I age about that kind of thing. But its juxtaposition in again, kind of what you said, it's similar to Elroy. It just like his depiction of early 80s LA is so enchanting and so feels like a fairy tale in the moment that everybody knows is not going to last. I mean, it's just has this this quality of like the best gallon of milk you've ever had that's like half of it's still there and the expiration date is today, and that it's all going to be going down the drain literally and figuratively. And so I really love that about it.
It's a good metaphor to talk about that way.
And also what I love about it too is that its depiction of queerness of it's cliche to say out loud, but the way the book depicts it, I think, is very finely tuned about this idea that you're one person for the rest of the world and your friends, and you're this other person behind the scenes. It was very deeply sad to me. I didn't actually expect to go into this book and think that it was going to be this tragic, sad story, but in the end, it actually was that more than anything. I'm very curious to what extent because he kind of basks in he kind of has an introduction and an epilogue kind of sorts, where
he's writing about it as if it's a memoir.
That's what's I don't even say this is a criticism. It's just confusing to me, like what is quote real and what is not.
And he said that parts of it are true, that there actually was somebody that was involved with a crime that he knew at that age, and he's kind of blown this up into this bigger thing.
And again, I don't find that as a criticism of the book. I'm just more curious what's real and what's not. You've got to wonder too, and this is true, I guess, of any writer of any age, of any era. But one thing I thought a lot about with this was, to what extent are the people who are fictionalized in this book reading this book, and what do they think about it? That could be said of any writer. But I was thinking about that a lot with this, about how odd and in its own way chilling it would have to be to see yourself depicted in a book like this that is definitely fictionalized, but you can tell the specificity is definitely drawn from his own
There's
life.
an anger that runs through this book, though, that's very potent in the sense that you can feel him being angry at these people, but also loving them still.
Yeah.
But that he has these very dark feelings about this time and place that he lived in that he's dealt with his entire life in his own way and that he's never really moved on from. And not even in the sense of this hyperbolic, there's a serial killer on the loose version of that. But another thing I forgot to mention, and then we can maybe move on unless you have something else to say about it, but that what I love about this book too is that idea of the 80s. This is very specific, and I might have talked about this at the time, but the 80s being this, like, you know, moving out of the 70s and kind of the chaos of the 70s, and thinking, oh, we're good, we're becoming adults, and we're in the 80s, and I know it was the early 80s, but it was already this very commodified decade, and a much more safe decade, in quotes, of Reagan America, of everything's under control, everything's going according to plan, there's nothing wrong, nothing can hurt you, everything's good, it's morning again in America, that whole idea about the 80s. But then there are these very 1970s things like the serial killer, the cult, like these big things of the 70s that make themselves very apparent and known.
Yeah, look around the corner of every
in
page.
The
really,
80s,
it feels like.
right?
Yeah,
and it's almost that idea of, and that idea, he says it a million times. That's one criticism of the book, is not the length of the book, but how often he repeats himself on certain ideas.
Yeah,
is that he says often about, we wanted to be adults, but we didn't know how dangerous that was and what that was going to mean. And that whole idea of that is very clear, I think, in that, like, oh, we all want to be adults and move on, but then when the adult world comes crashing in, and obviously it's a hyperbolic version of that, but someone who's literally killing your friends, you know, that is I think a good metaphor for that, and another thing I really like about it. But anyway,
yeah, again, it was definitely in the top 5 books I've read this year, and I thought a lot about it. I know Levi certainly did. So we both loved it. So that definitely we get the overlapping dialogue seal of approval. We could mention a little bit about Luca Guadagnino's apparently maybe going to adapt this into a miniseries. What are your thoughts on that?
I literally crapped my pants when I heard this.
Because you love Guadagnino,
right. I'm thinking especially, you know, because I love the stuff he's made anyway. I especially really loved, and I know I've talked about it before, I still recommend you, and I recommend this to you as well, because I know you probably watch it one of these days, but We Are Who We Are was one of my favorite miniseries TV shows of the last so many years. I think a lot of people basically have said it's kind of the good Euphoria. It's like a different version of that. It's about different things, but very similar as far as to what that is. I really love that show, and it kind of flew under the radar. What was interesting, it came out literally right around the time of the election of 2020, so it was kind of a thing people talked about at the beginning of when it was on, and then that happened, and it just totally went under the radar. Nobody talked about the ending of it, which I loved. I think especially though about Bones and All, which is about the 90s.
I was going to mention that too.
That'll really fit well.
I've thought about that movie a decent amount more since we've seen it.
Yeah, and that was good.
Yeah, I quite like that.
That didn't make my top 10 of last year, I don't think.
It would probably make the bottom part of mine. But
it was close. I think it was one of those that would have just barely been outside of it. But yeah, I think I highly anticipate that. I can't think of a better person to do that than him, because somebody's already who is queer themselves and has already dealt with that in sensibility and pretty much everything I've seen from them. That'll be, I think, a really fascinating version of that. I love to see, because I thought about it the whole time. I could visualize the book in my head as a show or a movie, but so.
All right, so Levi's pick for the Elroy Award for favorite book is The Shards. Mine is, and the winner of the Harry Dean
goes to
Freedom by Jonathan Franzen, which actually come out back in 2010, so it's
an older book,
a little bit of an older book. But it also, I remember that when, I don't know if you remember when that book came out, the cover was everywhere. That was like one of the biggest blockbuster books of 2010. I've really fell in love with the work of Jonathan Franzen over the past about 2 years. Well, a little more than that maybe. I read Corrections at the end of 2019. It was actually during my whole first semester teaching, so I always remember that. And then in 2021, right when it came out, I read Crossroads, which, while also the finishing move of The American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes, is also for Franzen the beginning of a trilogy of books he's working on about this family over time. Also, other books of his I've read, because I've actually read all of his novels now. I also caught up on The 27th City, his first novel, Strong Motion. Just to talk about those very briefly. 27th City was pretty good. I know he's not a huge fan of that and Strong Motion as much as the years go by, and I kind of see why. Because really since the Corrections onward, he's been more focused on these family dramas. Yeah. 27th City, a clever book, but not something I particularly like a lot. I like fine enough. Strong Motion I actually do like a decent amount more than that. And then really from the Corrections onward, Corrections in 2001, Freedom, Purity, interestingly, which I also read this year, and I did quite like, is a weird way, kind of a cross between those early books and these later books. That's kind of, interestingly, kind of a combination of those. And then Crossroads. But Freedom in 2010, like I said, I remember what a big deal that book was when it came out. He had not released a book in about 9 years, and The Corrections was this hugely celebrated book when it came out in 2001. He became kind of a household name, not just because he was feuding with Oprah when that came out and the whole controversy that happened with that, but he was just a kind of a titan of this whole idea of, is he the new, quote, the great American writer, and that's something that he's kind of chuckled and laughed at and asked what worth that has now in the 21st century even. Freedom is such a simple book to just say what the plot is. It's basically about a man and a woman and their love story over several decades and the family that they produced and the various tangents to go off from that. So to say what it's about is very simplistic, but I'm a huge, huge fan of just, we've talked about this before on the pod with films or novels as well, just the whole idea of just a drama for drama's sake, or literary fiction is really my favorite genre in writing. To depict and bring to life real people who are dealing with real problems and real things. I like genre fiction here and there, but literary fiction is again, I know I sound like the biggest pretentious person ever saying that, but I'm a big fan of literary fiction and its potential as really one of the purest works of art that can be produced in a mass way. And so for Freedom, for me, it was, again, a very, on the whole, a simplistic story, but what Franzen does so well is to dig, and think these people. They are real people to you by the time you get to the end of this book. And anytime a book can do that, it just feels very special. And so Freedom, I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I think there's been talk of it maybe being a movie, I think, at some point. I know the Corrections has been through a lot of false starts over the years. It said apparently maybe it's going to be a mini-series or a television series now in July 2020. That was announced, but we'll see if that happens. But yeah, Freedom by Jonathan Franzen.
I've yet to read any Jonathan Franzen. Kyle's been trying to get me to. I might at some point. Honestly, I might read Crossroads first if it's getting close to the point where he's going to write that new book.
Oh, one thing I'd like to say about that too, which I've told anybody who's interested in it, that's one of the best depictions of Christian faith I've ever read by anybody who was an agnostic / atheist. I think he's more. I think he'd be more categorized as an agnostic, but he grew up in church environment, and
from Chicago area, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and his depiction of youth group culture in that book is something that is so specific, and my own experience was not exactly a mirror of that, but there are a lot of similarities.
In the 70s is different.
Yeah, and what I loved about it too is it was in the early 70s. Crossroads was. Freedom was contemporary for the most part, although it flashes back to earlier parts. But Crossroads was set in like early 70s, and there's not a lot of stuff about the early 70s in there. It kind of filters in throughout, but it feels like it could also have been written in about the world in 2011, but
It's honestly a
definitely
more
recommend
authentic
that.
way to write a book because it's more about the story than it is about, oh, this is the time period.
And that's why I want to reread Crossroads before the next book comes out, because he's done these family dramas so well in single volume forms and single books that I'm really curious to see how he's going to stretch a series out of it. And apparently, I think I heard with that one that he basically started it as a single novel, but then he ended up writing so much in the early parts, he was like, well, no, this is going to be its whole own book.
Right.
And then that it just kept expanding. So I'm a huge fan of him. He's become a little bit of a cultural lightning rod, not to the extent, well, weirdly in a bigger extent of Bret Easton Ellis, just because he's probably a little more well-known.
Right.
But the things he says are in of themselves less controversial, but he is more famous, so there's he gets in more, quote, trouble because he's talked about political correctness and the various things that I don't always agree with. But nonetheless, he is, I think, a truly great writer that is one of our best writers, I'd say. So I'm very curious to see how he's going to develop. But again, Freedom, it's one of those books that, like Corrections, you see in literally every used bookstore in America.
Yeah.
Which I think is, is just kind of funny. And you see, Don DeLillo's Underworld very frequently. He just writes a lot of the books that are now kind of live in those spaces. But again, I would highly, highly recommend you check that out if you get the chance. Now, on to our next category. Now, some of these categories, we kind of jointly agreed on winners.
Yeah,
and then other
and
ones
I'll
we're
say
kind of doing our own picks.
We may move through these a little quicker than we just did with that, I assume, because we've talked about these already this year.
Yeah, a lot of these movies we've addressed in some form.
So it may be quick. So,
first up, we have the Best Creepy Crawl, a.k.a. Best Horror Movie of 2023. And the winner of the best...
The Harry Dean goes to...
Creepy Crawl. The Harry Dean goes to Skinamarink from earlier this year.
Kyle Edward Ball, I believe, made that. Is that correct?
I think that's his name. Now, I don't feel like we saw actually a lot of horror movies.
As a Kyle?
Yeah, he's fine. He's good for me.
I
don't feel like we saw as many horror movies this year.
I was looking. It was literally this and Evil Dead Rise and Thanksgiving,
which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, but
Skinamarink, though, I think even if we had seen more, the grab you by your throat nature of this movie immediately made an impression. And I mean, it's one of those movies. I don't know, to speak for myself, maybe this is true for you. As you were watching it, you knew you were watching something special. Not necessarily something that is purely, totally great and isn't without flaws.
Yeah, I had my
but that is
criticisms
nonetheless I've never seen anything exactly like this before.
Yeah.
Now, we've only seen it kind of that first time. That's one of those movies that I'm not super eager to rewatch, frankly.
I've got the Blu-ray just because it was so cheap.
And that's a credit to the movie, by the way.
Yeah.
How has that movie held up in your mind since we talked about it? I know we talked about it earlier in the year, but what about it to you makes it kind of a very special, iconic horror movie in recent years?
Well, it's a horror movie of the time. I think, there's a lot of... there is that... I do want to say her name correctly, so let me look. There's a lot of those movies that are being made now that are the kind of more internet horror.
Yeah. That's got a specific name.
The creepypasta stuff.
Analog horror?
Analog, which is funny because it's not analog. But Jane Shoburn really kind of a non-binary filmmaker kind of specializes in that. They've made that film We're All Going to the World's Fair, which I know was kind of a big deal a couple years ago when that came out. And then also... I think they have made that film that's going to come out this year. I saw the TV Glow. And so there's a lot of these movies that are like that now, that they're about, these very, I guess, millennial or Gen Y or Gen Z ideas about loneliness and kind of the stylistic loneliness, liminal spaces, that whole kind of is very much come out of the internet of the past 20 years.
I was just seeing, I saw the TV Globes are actually going to be playing at Sundance in like 2 weeks.
And I think Sjoberg have also, I think, made some music videos for some different musicians. I think maybe some of the Boy Genius folks. Okay. Maybe they might have made something for, I can't remember. But anyway, and so those are some movies I've wanted to see. Some of those I've heard are good. But this is, I think, the most blatant version of that. It's the biggest. I mean, I remember when We're All Going to the World's Fair came out. That was a big version of that. But I feel like Skinamarink is going to be even more memorable in that sense, because it also straddles the line between that and this kind of nostalgia for the 90s, which was not very long ago.
Yeah.
But
95, I think, is when it starts. When it ends, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the movie becomes less interested about its time and place as it goes. But what I liked about the movie was that it didn't actually have a lot of big jump scares, and a whole lot didn't really happen. It was a lot more about the mood and the tone and the vibe of it, of that idea of being up in the middle of the night. And this makes it a very explicit kind of version of that, of like things that happen, but also the feeling is the same. What I did like was the fact that I was very rarely, worried or scared throughout this, but because it lulls you into this kind of complacency. But then there's those times when it does grab you by the throat, that it is kind of like, oh, okay, and then you're kind of scared again for a little while, and then you kind of it's kind of like dozing off and having bad dreams in its own way.
This, to me, represents a very promising evolution of found footage horror. Mm-hmm. Which I've been waiting for movies to do more and more of, which is use that aesthetic, but do not even use the pretense of a taping taking place.
Right.
End of Watch, which was not a horror movie, well, it was in certain ways, but about the Jake Gyllenhaal, Michael Pena movie from a few years ago. We probably mentioned it here on the pod before.
I haven't seen it yet, but yeah.
That was a movie that started off and basically was a found footage movie, but also had certain angles that could not have been from the body cams of the police that are in the movie. And that's that to me, I remember seeing that at the time and thinking, oh, fine, why don't we just take that energy and take that look, but get rid of the pretense of, there being a taping taking place, like I said. And this was an evolution of that idea, I thought, because it used a lot of that, those ideas and the theory and the angles of I'm going to kind of have so much of a shot be about the corner of this room, and you hear all these sounds and whatnot, and it could be from the perspective of the kid, or it could just be literally the camera just decided to look at this. I mean, I just thought that was a very worthwhile and necessary evolution of found footage horror, because this is not a found footage movie, but it uses a lot of the language cinematically that comes from found footage horror. And so I really like this movie. Again, I don't know how often I'm going to rewatch it, but again, I'd say that more as a credit to the movie, because it's deeply disturbing, I would say, for me anyways.
Yeah.
And so, that's definitely the best creepy crawl.
Yeah, I feel like there really wasn't anything else that anybody really talked about this year, because it kind of was so big, it just hit everybody like a wave. I mean,
and again, I've been talked about in this pod. I feel like I've actually cozied up a little more to horror over the course of this pod, and being like, well, it is what it is, and there's some good ones.
There's really wasn't a whole lot this year,
but other years there are several to kind of talk about, and it seemed like this was really the only one that made a kind of immediate
either it be legacy movies, or I know that one movie Talk to Me came out that we missed, the Australian movie, or was it British? I don't remember, I keep forgetting, but anyway, that came out. I know that was kind of big. This coming year, we've already got Night Swim, which I really want to see, just because that's just what is going on in this. This is insane, and you can't not see a movie called Night Swim. That's just that's battle truck kind of deal of a movie, So anyway, but there really wasn't a whole lot this year. So I know we missed, like I said, a couple things, but
But I mean, I think Skinamarink was very widely beloved though by even horror people.
Right.
All right. So now, the comeback player of the year.
And the Harry Dean goes to Alden Ehrenreich for particularly Cocaine Bear and Oppenheimer.
I feel like he was a very easy, obvious choice for this
definitely.
because he's somebody that we've liked for the last several years. And
really, I've got to say, and I've said this before, I've said this on air multiple times, one of the biggest examples of somebody just getting totally shafted by Hollywood. It's very strange. And part of that was all wrapped up in the Han Solo
I'd say it's mostly,
movie,
yeah,
and
that
that people's criticism of that, I don't know. I feel like there was a lot more criticism to be had towards Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who have proven that they can't make movies,
and yet they continually fail upward.
Yes, it's very strange
because the Spider-Verse movies they're now a part of.
Oh yeah, they did those. Just wow, yeah.
But a lot's come out recently about them, and because they're producers and kind of brain children behind those. But then a lot's come out about how they treat the workers and the effects artists and the animators of those movies. But look that up. But they kind of got booted from Solo, and then again failed upward, and obviously taking on the mantle of a character played by Harrison Ford is obviously undeniably a tricky task. I don't even really think about that movie all that much in a good or a bad way. And also, now that movie did have its problems, but would you agree that also was became the whipping boy from all angles of Star Wars fandom in 2018 post Last Jedi? Whether you like or don't like that movie, but what the frenzy was at that particular moment, that movie kind of was the victim of all this hate that came its way. That again, is not perfect, but it seemed a little outsized. Because of those
and I thought that movie was actually fine. I was kind of surprised how much I liked it at the time. I haven't thought about it really since then. I mean, the biggest thing we remember from that is Darth Maul for some reason being at the end of it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Nothing was done really with.
No,
I guess it fed into Star Wars Rebels.
Yeah,
or
and Thandie Newton was in that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway,
Woody Harrelson.
Right. And then it had that Phoebe Waller-Bridge character in it. That's kind of memorable. But
Donald Glover as Lando.
Oh
which
yeah,
was the same summer as Atlanta season 2 was on. Yeah.
God, Atlanta.
Yeah.
Still a wild show.
Speaking of wild shows, he was also on Brave New World, a TV show that no one knows existed, by the way.
Well, when you're adapting Aldous Huxley, you automatically have a problem of exposure.
Yeah.
But, but I thought he would, that's all to say. I like that movie fine enough as whatever. But since then, because we had first seen him really in, I guess, Hail Caesar before that. And I
rewatched that this year, actually, just independently of everything else. And he was brilliant yet again in that. I wouldn't say I forgot about him exactly, but seeing him again, I was like, how could Hollywood fumble this new star in such a way?
And this sounds like a criticism, and I actually mean it as a compliment. That's a very Wes Anderson performance. I wonder when he'll be in a Wes Anderson movie at this point.
Probably.
Also, we've talked about it a million times on here by now, but of course he was also in Rules Don't Apply. Here Comes Santa Claus moment. Basically, as we've said, we need to just go and rewatch that scene and the cheeseburger scene, and then just move on. And then he kind of disappeared.
Well, even before that, we've talked about him, I know before, but Blue Jasmine, he had a small role. And that's actually a really terrific late Woody Allen movie. He was in some TV, that Brave New World show, which no one talked about at all, really.
Was that an Amazon show? I bet that was an Amazon show, wasn't it?
Let's see. It says Universal Content Productions.
I wonder what it went on.
Is that on Peacock, maybe?
Maybe.
Oh, yeah, it's Peacock.
Oh, never mind. I was wrong. All right.
It looks like it easily could be an Amazon show, though, because they put out all kinds of stuff.
Man in the High Castle.
But, literally, he was not in a movie for 5 years after Solo.
No, actually, Man in the High Castle was Hulu. Dang. Anyway.
And then he was in 4 movies this year, though.
Yeah.
One of which was a short film that he wrote and directed called Shadow Brothers Sunday, which I remember hearing about way back earlier this year and thought it sounded good. But Fair Play. Oh, I heard that was good too, actually. It was him and let's see,
Keira Knightley.
No, some actress named Phoebe Devenor. I'm not heard of her name, but follows a young couple whose relationship starts to unravel following an unexpected promotion in a cutthroat hedge fund firm. I heard that was good, actually.
Yeah.
Ryan Johnson actually executive produced it.
I think I had heard something about that, but
But in particular, we wanted to shout him out in Cocaine Bear and Oppenheimer.
Right.
We loved Cocaine Bear.
Yeah, we talked about that. We had said that then. We said, "Oh, this is his comeback moment," because he was finally really.
And I don't
good.
think we even knew he was going to be in Oppenheimer.
No,
and
I
has a
wasn't aware
lot
of
of different actors in it. So.
Right. Well, we talked about that at the time.
He kind of what I love about his scenes, particularly in Oppenheimer, is he kind of plays the sort of a liberal conscience to. Because all his scenes are with a lot of his scenes are with Robert Downey Jr.'s character Strauss, not Levi Strauss, but
Louis Strauss.
Louis Strauss.
Let's be even more confused.
Yeah, but like he was kind of like, acting as the guy who got Downey Jr. to give all this exposition, which acted as this kind of narration for a lot of the movie or portions of the movie. And that he gets to kind of rub it in Downey Jr.'s face at the end after it all kind of falls apart for him. But again, he just has, a certain charm and a movie star wit that, again, I don't know if he's going to be like, obviously, the Timothy Chalamets of the world.
No, and I'm not even saying
people
he
of that
should
level.
be. Yeah,
but he definitely is a worthwhile
Yeah.
younger talent that deserves more.
Right, that's all
given,
we're kind of saying here is that why can't he get a chance and just to remain and be a character actor or whatever it is he wants to do, Like I said, you don't have to be the best.
And Oppenheimer has we're getting ready to literally have a whole awards going to be going out to aspects of Oppenheimer here in a moment, but Oppenheimer has a lot of heavy hitters and a lot of major actors in it. I mean, you kind of forget somebody like Matt Damon is in the movie. I mean, there's so many people involved. And I'm
not even kidding. I forgot he was in that movie until just now, and of course he's in that.
Yeah,
is that one of the big roles?
But I mean, there's a lot of heavy hitters in that, and the fact that he leaves as much of an impression as he does, I think speaks well of him.
Yeah.
So
to go back and jump back to Cocaine Bear real quick, what I liked about that, other than the fact he wore a members only jacket, was that I just thought he was really good in that. I mean, and he feels like. It's kind of I don't want to say everything's meta on this podcast today, but it feels like a meta performance of like, man, and that his wife had died, and it's like, man, I'm just down, and it feels like almost like him saying about himself, man, I've just not been in anything, and it's just been a bad road, like, not comparing a person's death to their career, but like, and then him kind of being more triumphant in the end and actually taking charge of the situation and actually making decisions feels like a really good comeback role randomly for that. And I thought that was a good choice for that. And the whole movie, I quite liked anyway. I know people were kind of about, but I really liked it.
I really think people are trying to be too clever on hating on that movie. I'm like, we had a lot of fun with it. The crowd was into it. That was just a perfect, like, okay, studio movie. This is what like an average studio movie should be, is something like this. Right. I think the overall Hollywood would be better if that was like what it was.
Yeah.
One other thing that kind of Alden Right content that came out this year that I enjoyed was a special feature.
I was going to mention that
for Oppenheimer, where he was talking about how great his experience was making the movie, and then kind of at the very end he laughs and says, "It's so great to be saying this about something and mean it." Which directly flies in the face of what the whole solo experience had to have been like. So, and speaks well of him. So, Alden Right, congratulations, you are this Overlapping Dialogues Comeback Player of the Year.
Yes, these next two awards are going to be probably obviously a one-time only award.
Yeah,
I don't expect that we'll be returning.
I don't see an Oppenheimer 2 on the horizon.
But this next one is our favorite performance in Oppenheimer. So who wants to go first? Do you want to go first?
I can. Yeah.
And Kyle's choice for this Harry Dean goes to
Jason Clarke.
Interesting. Okay, that was not one of my picks. So
Jason Clarke. Let me look up his character's name real quick. He's basically
Roger Robb.
It is something. It's like
literally like what?
Let me see here. I should have had this pulled up, but oh well. Roger Robb.
Like, are you kidding me? And that was a real person, by the way.
Yeah, he's an attorney and a future U.S. Circuit judge who served as special counsel to the AEC at Oppenheimer's security hearing. Pretty much like, the framing device of so much of the movie is Oppenheimer, played by Cillian Murphy, by the way, who was terrific. And I think he almost can fall through the cracks of a movie like this because
Right.
sometimes when you look directly at the lead of a movie, you take them for granted, and I've been a critic of people about that before, but all props to him because I think gives the performance of his career in this. But what I loved about the scenes with Roger Robb is he's basically interrogating Oppenheimer, played by Jason Clarke, one of our great shouting white men in suits actors. Yep. And this is in the great tradition of other great white men in suits shouting at one another, from A Few Good Men to Syriana, 12 Angry Men, a lot of men. There was another one that I had in mind I couldn't remember. But just white men shouting at one another, actors.
I mean, James Remar is in this movie, if that says anything about a white man
JFK
shouting.
is a roundabout way a version of this, too.
Yeah. Kevin
he
Costner,
just turned it up to 11 in those scenes. Mm-hmm. Also, I wanted to mention this. He was also in the Kane Mutiny Court Martial.
Kane Mutiny Court Martial,
which was William Friedkin's last movie.
It came out this year. I heard it was really good, actually.
Yeah, it got great reviews, and I heard he was really good in it, along with Lewis Pullman, who was Bill Pullman's son. I heard good things about. But
did that come out on Showtime?
I think it came out on Showtime.
Dang, we should have
watched
watched
that way. It's on Paramount Plus, it says.
Oh, well.
But anyways, I've liked Jason Clarke for some time now. I remember we talked about him back when we talked about the Apes movies.
Yeah, when he was in Public Enemies, the greatest death ever.
But how he was just so pugnacious and so punchable and hateable.
His
thought
scene
he was great.
with Emily Blunt is just another level.
Oh, well, she's actually finally turns it up on him and kind of throws it back in his face. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot to choose from. There's a lot of names I thought of, and after you name yours, we can probably just go through some other ones really quickly. Yeah. But he was my favorite performance, and not even just because of all the meme potential. There's all the memes that have come out of his performances.
Shouting, and
So, Jason Clarke is mine. But, Levi.
And my pick for my favorite performance in Oppenheimer is Robert Downey Jr.
Ooh, okay.
I felt like I was going a little more. I already marked that off, but
okay.
I felt like I was getting a little more obvious with this one, but he's just so good in this movie.
He's probably going to win Best Supporting Actor. Probably.
I hope so, because listen, Robert Downey Jr. to me for a long time has been a living, walking train wreck of an actor. Forgoing even his entire, beginning of his career where he was on drugs and got in trouble, had all, whatever. And also the fact that he had kind of, I don't want to make this sound so bad as this, but, kind of turned his back on his father's legacy of being well, I don't know. I guess if he's doing drugs and getting arrested, I guess that is more like his dad.
But artistically speaking...
Well, I mean, in the end, I'm talking
there's no room for him in the end.
I'm talking past, Shortcuts and Natural Born Killers and even Chaplin. I'm talking about,
like
Iron
in his
Man.
U.S. Marshals era?
I'm talking Iron Man era onward,
Yeah.
I'm talking The Judge. I'm talking Thug. I'm talking Dr. Dolittle.
It does make me laugh a little bit, and I actually, believe it or not, want to go back and watch
There's no
The
movie
Judge.
called Thug, by the way. I'm just saying.
But, it was funny. It's that was one of his first movies he had done for a while outside of the Marvel sphere, and so it was he returns to drama. And I kind of roll my eyes even now thinking about that movie, but go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, needs to return to the womb is what he needs to do in that situation. And come back out, we want you, but let's do it. But he must have done that with this, because I swear, this really was another level of a performance that I was really thrilled by in every way. It's so interesting to have a villain performance like this in a movie, because he's, not your obviously stereotypical villain. It's like a bureaucratic villain. Just a really great performance. I don't really have anything to say other than that I forgot he could be this good.
Yeah.
Because normally that's not something I would expect, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so hopefully this is a renaissance for him. It seems like it was, as far as the kind of the award circuit he's gone on already and all the interviews and stuff. It seems like he's more committed to actually doing movies again.
I was frankly shocked to what extent him and Nolan loved working together because those are not two personalities that you would exactly imagine. Not necessarily quote getting along, but actually really enjoying their working experience.
Right. Well, interestingly, coming also out of the fact they're both comic book movie, pillars, like monuments to that.
I mean, Downey Jr. more so than Nolan.
What I mean about that too is The Dark Knight and Iron Man came out the same summer. So, that idea of them working in the same space but not working together. Mm-hmm. It was a really savvy choice, too, to make that call to do that.
Well, I heard, too, that apparently, he wanted Downey Jr. was his first choice, but he also told him very on, I don't want you doing the kind of the thing you normally do. I want you to do something a little subtler
more
and
communist brother.
And that paid off. I mean, Downey Jr. proved he could do that, which I think speaks well of him. And also there's probably a lot of younger people who only know him as Iron Man who saw this and was like,
and they're like, Louis Strauss,
just shocked that wait a minute, that's them. It is
the man
also
who moved the earth.
It is funny to see him go from Iron Man to this because Iron Man as a character was very much a product of Cold War era America, and so to see this character depicted, which was, in many ways, one of the bureaucratic villains of domestic policy in America's years during the Cold War in the 50s. Which, again, I think I've never been the biggest fan of Robert Downey Jr., but I would agree he's terrific in this and definitely deserves all the awards attention that's coming his way. But he don't need an Oscar. He just won a Harry Dean Stanton Award, so Harry Dean, so he can retire right now, and he's a Harry Dean winner. But
actually, don't though, because I want to see what more. Do.
What are some other names to shout out? Quick? David Krumholtz was going to be my runner-up.
My runner-up was going to be Josh Hartnett.
He was great
because Josh Hartnett came from an era of trash. Of being in Pearl Harbor, being in Black Dahlia, being in a lot of those
a World War II double feature of Pearl Harbor and this, See how he grew up.
I thought he really was quite good in this, though. The few scenes he was in, I thought he was really good. And I was surprised. I was like, oh, Josh Hartnett, in a movie again, David Krumholtz was another one I was going to mention. That they said he was great. We haven't even talked about Benny Safdie yet, which the fact that he was in this, and is kind of more on that lower level of oh yeah, they're in this, by the way. It was really good.
Mentioned Matt Damon earlier.
We mentioned Matt Damon.
Again, you kind of blink and forget he's actually has a
He's really good. He has a thankless role that I think he's really good in. And I'm kind of more of a Matt Damon agnostic. Sometimes I like him, sometimes
not even that I like him than not.
Not even that I don't like him. I'm just kind of okay, whatever, I mean,
I don't think he's necessarily on the level of Tom Hanks, but we're going to look back and go, he was a part of all these movies over this stretch of time.
The Martian, We Bought a Zoo, all those great films.
I mean, Tom Hanks told him to earn this. So.
Drive Away Dolls. I do want to see that, actually, but there's that one guy.
Well, Emily Blunt also is terrific. We mentioned her earlier. Florence Pugh.
Let me look at a list. Yeah, right. Because they're great. In a movie that's dominated by men, they are really good. Rami Malek I actually liked in this, too.
He's in the intro.
Right. He's not somebody I would normally care all that much about. I did think Tom Conti was a good Albert Einstein. Very strange performance.
It's been memeified now, but that moment where, Oppenheimer's being dropped off on the side of the road late at night, and literally he emerges out of the darkness. A lot of people were saying that's how Nolan shoots Batman.
It is
the Nolan Batman movies. How he just appears like that.
Dane DeHaan I thought was really good. He's good. He's kind of like an all Darren Wright type.
Modine.
I mean, Matthew Modine was another one. Also, somebody I wanted to mention, this guy Tony Goldwyn. He's been in a bunch of stuff.
He was on. Oh God, that CBS show that was huge.
Oh,
Kerry Washington was.
Scandal.
Yeah, he was big.
He was the president on that, wasn't
he?
Yeah. He's in the movie. He's fine, but specifically, just he has that look of a guy that's just you would be the guy running this thing.
Oh God,
he's
who's
very
the
much
guy
like
that's
that guy.
In the Saulnier movies? Who?
Oh, Macon Blair.
Blair.
He's another one.
Oppenheimer's lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on and on and on and on. Alex Wolff also showed up as that Luis Alvarez, who's a really big nuclear physicist, obviously. Just a ton of people. And Josh Peck also, I forgot, he was good.
All the Megan memes that came out when he was announced to be in this, of Megan setting off the bomb.
And
all
somebody
that.
we haven't mentioned yet, who I think would have been my second pick, Cillian Murphy.
Well, I said earlier that he gets the thankless role,
and that he's just really great in this. I mean, and it's nice to see him finally get that big role, because he's gotten bigger and bigger as he's been in different Nolan movies.
He was
Obviously,
also terrific in Dunkirk.
Yeah. This is a pleasure, yacht. Turn around. Yeah, he's very whatever. But he is really great in this, and I don't want that to be buried in the midst of all these other people.
He's definitely going to be nominated for Best Actor. He's got a decent shot of winning for the Academy. But he didn't. He did not win a Harry Dean Award. So maybe next year, Killian, if you put in the time and put in the hard work, maybe just maybe you'll be able to earn a Harry Dean Award. Now, that senator from Massachusetts, John Kennedy. I deeply love that. It's like the Robin moment at the end of.
It's like the Roger Robb moment in the movie.
Dark Knight Rises. Yeah. But there is part of me that rolls my eyes at that. But genuinely, I'm like, no, that's Nolan kind of very clearly putting a little bit of a footnote at the end of this about
and his communist brother.
About like the president who is going to deal with this more than any other president as far as these questions. So I thought that was kind of eye roll worthy, but also I deeply love it at the same time. Yeah. Now, since this is probably the last time we're really going to talk about Oppenheimer, it would be a good chance to say, because it's not our film of the year, because there's something else coming for that. But it is many people's film of the year.
I think it's the best movie of this year, star-wise, for me.
It's between that, something else, and what our actual film of the year is. For me personally, it's those three.
Okay.
So what about it makes it stand out to you as one of those movies that when we think of 2023 in film is
mainly because of the Barbenheimer phenomenon, but also just that people went and saw this movie, and that it was a great movie, but it was also a popular movie. And we only really had movies like that every so often, like Titanic. JFK was another version, it's got compared to a lot. These movies that Social Network, that are that big, and that I forgot about that. That'd be one that are that big, but actually are that great. Yeah. And that people actually went to see, and it was Dark Knight is even a version of that in its own way. That those big popular movies that penetrated that space, and the fact that people are still talking about the sex scenes in this movie
goes to Nolan has never really had many, and so this was his
which
first
goes
time
to show how big this movie was. Like, I mean, we remember it, and it hasn't been that long ago, but just this movie really did this and Barbie, but took over in a way that was so big in the summer months there. I mean, it was everybody was talking about this. Everybody was like, "Did you go see this? Oh, what did you think about this? What did you think about that?"
You wrote a whole thing about this way back when, and we talked about it.
Yeah.
I would say that, regardless, because we're going to talk about Barbie here in a second, but that 1-2 punch was probably the best summer movie moment post-pandemic. In terms of that it felt like people were actually going to the movies in a bigger way because of those two movies.
Right, and Barbie got talked about a lot, but I actually felt like more people talked about Oppenheimer, strangely.
Well, that's because the themes of Oppenheimer are inherently more
but also that I'm talking
and
normal
important.
people, though, too. I'm saying, like, even normal audience, like moviegoers that don't go a lot. I think because they don't normally see movies like that. So Barbie, although it made the more of the money and was the bigger thing, and more people, that was what got people to go see these movies. Ultimately, was Barbie, I think. Mm-hmm. But this movie was so big, and it had this longer gestating period than Barbie did. Partly, like I said, because there's a lot more to think and talk about. Barbie's very on the surface about what it is.
I do think this is a big deal for me to say out loud. I think this is Nolan's greatest achievement as a filmmaker. In terms of when it came out, what it's about, how financially successful it was, and also the awards and prestige attention it is getting, I think checks a lot of boxes that he's never even quite encountered before as a filmmaker. Right. So I do think the prestige or the Memento.
The Mentos. That's what it is. Mentos in Pepsi. That's the movie.
Are better movies. Yeah. I do think what this means on a more substantial level is his overall would be categorizes as, quote, to me,
it's
greatest
his.
achievement.
It's his For Whom the Bell Tolls, if you want to use that as a
Sure.
example, I guess.
I mean, and it's one of those things like, where do you go from here? You can't go back and make like Tenet again. You know what I mean?
Then
Like,
don't. By the way.
what is his
Right.
ceiling of what's next? Because that's even more exciting. You know. I think
What will be his Roger Robbie the Robot?
That's it. It's like 3-hour Robbie the Robot movie. You know, his take on that.
He's like, I'm
that
gonna make
mythos.
liquor for this redneck trash. Like, yeah.
Now
Anyway.
we had to follow up Oppenheimer with Barbie.
Now he did do
the
that.
discussion
He
of
did
Barbie.
do that. That robot in
Tars.
Tars in. I was
Interstellar.
going to say Tar, but no,
Yeah.
in Interstellar. So, Robbie the Robot.
Mhm.
That's my prediction.
What, a team up buddy comedy? Robbie the Robot and Tars, like.
Oh, I don't
link
know.
up?
I'm just saying a Robbie the Robot movie at least.
Okay.
I don't know. Dom Cobb, Roger Rob. There's something going on there. There's something going on. I'm just saying.
Even though that.
Those so funny is Roger Rob was a real person too, but
Yeah.
it makes you think you're like, oh, he made that crap up. No, it was
Did
real.
he like go back in time, Nolan
and say
style?
Roger Rob?
Like,
yeah.
But anyways, so we gotta get into Barbie now because it was
we gotta
definitely
get into that. No, just kidding. We're not doing that.
So
We're
now
not
our next
interrupting
category is just our favorite thing about Barbie. Period. It could be this kind of gives a lot of latitude to talk about a lot of different things, but our favorite thing about Barbie. Period. I can go first here.
Okay. And Kyle's pick for his favorite thing about Barbie.
This might sound kind of come from a
The Harry
random
Dean
place,
goes to.
but the validation of Margot Robbie's superstardom.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I mean, part of that is definitely Margot Robbie's performance, which I think is actually to the point of maybe being underrated now, because rightfully so, Ryan Gosling has gotten a lot of praise for Ken.
That's going to be related to mine. So,
But I don't think we really recognize how hard a performance to pull off Barbie actually is. You are playing what
Barbie.
for 60 years has served as the definition.
I mean, come on, Barbie, let's go party.
Of wish fulfillment femininity.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you are literally embodying, a concept that is like, even on a bigger scale than a Batman or a Spider-Man. I mean, it's on this other level of like what people's expectations
Also, because
were.
that hasn't been depicted officially.
Yeah, so there's a lot of expectations about
other
what that
than all
is.
the Barbie movie, but no,
and for her to portray that character with like not stupidity, but like a simplicity that then goes
an innocence, I'd
an
say,
innocence, a naivete that undergoes considerable transformations throughout. I think actually a really high bar for someone to achieve. Much less also, she is one of our best movie stars that's been generated in the last like 10 years. Because some have come and gone even over the space of time we've seen that. I mean, Chris Pratt, oh my God, Chris Pratt's a big movie star. But he is not in movies that are consistently relevant or talked about in the same way that Margot Robbie is. I think a big part of that for Robbie is the fact that she actually produces and is behind the scenes kind of instigating and necessitating or fulfilling these movies to come out, period.
Right.
I just last night rewatched Babylon, and I'd already made this pick anyways that this was going to be my thing for this, but she's so red hot a presence in that movie that cannot be denied. I think, again, weirdly, that this performance might become overrated. Now, does it deserve Best Actress attention? She'll probably get nominated just because of what the big hit of it was. I don't know if it deserves to win, quote, Best Actress, but I think it is, like, as a pop, fun performance, something that speaks well of her as a movie star, and her range also, even within that one role, the range that she displays. And again, this is going to be one of the few times I'm able to talk about this with her. Her very, very small performance in Asteroid City, which is a wholly other movie, so I don't want to get into that right now, really, but is one of the most impactful moments of that movie, too. Mm-hmm. So really just all these things combined for me to, because when you see the emergence of a new movie star, they kind of inherently have a waiting out period, and you're like, all right, like, they're a nice new young face, but are they going to stick the land, and are they going to be in enough things that prove that they are who we think they are or think they could be?
Yeah, because
and by this point, this for her has definitely validated that question.
When I had first kind of heard of her at all was with I, Tonya, that kind of era.
Even before that, there was Wolf of Wall Street. Was
right.
Kind of,
well, yes.
She was actually on Pan Am, that Mad Men clone.
I had forgot. I knew there was something I was forgetting. She was in Wolf of Wall Street. I thought she was really good in that, and I'm kind of in the middle on that movie on a lot of ways. But she is really good in that. But as far as into like an awards contention, like Margot Robbie is in I, Tonya, and so that was one. But yeah, I think the last so many years have been really good to her as far as getting these great roles, working with great directors. And that's her choice too. I mean, I'm not saying like it's been all luck. She has the stardom to do that.
Yeah,
and I think she's really great in Babylon in particular. It's probably her best performance, that or her Sharon Tate, I think. But that, even as good as that is, that's still tempered with a controversy just not even to do with her, just of even depicting that person is automatically controversial.
Apparently the family was on board with all
and that's fine, but I'm saying I even still think Babylon
sure.
is a better performance. But
there's more inherently there.
Yeah, right.
For her.
But yeah, I think that's valid. Mine's predictable, but sort of.
Well, Levi, your honoring of your favorite thing about Barbie,
the Harry Dean, goes to its depiction of the patriarchy.
Okay.
As horses.
Okay.
It's all about horses. I don't want to go into this acting like, because you're laughing right now hearing this, because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm like, its depiction of the patriarchy was so good. No. I know it's stupid. Like, it's a joke.
Or one note.
Or not even that it was unwarranted. It was just whatever. I mean, But what I liked about it, and part of this is Brian Gosling, Brian Doyle Murray, what the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Ryan Gosling was really great in this. I'm not exactly going to talk about him when I talk about this, though. More of like what I liked about the absurdity of the way it viewed the absurdity of patriarchy is literally, I thought it was just about liking horses, man.
Yeah.
Like, just the stupidity with which most sexism exists. I've never really seen a movie do that before, so I kind of appreciated it. Was like, it's really simpler than you think it is. It's just really stupid. Mm-hmm. Is what Now, that's not to say that there are not calculated, and you could say the same thing about racism too. That you could kind of twist that around. I think this is more of a negative version of this. You could twist that around and say, "Oh, it's just kind of a stupidity or an ignorance." Like, no, I do believe there are people who definitively say, no, I want to screw these people over, and I want to marginalize these people based on this so I can make money, and I think they are lesser than. Mm-hmm. I think that is true. Mm-hmm. But I think what I did like about this was viewing it as the stupidity with which everyday people, I think, sometimes engage in marginalization is, and I'm talking about more in the sexism realm, not in the racism realm, because that's, I think, slightly different. But that with that, I think it's just the stupidity of like, oh, well, just things people say about women, can't live with them, can't live without them, or women, I can't understand them. It's like, what do you mean? That's just such a, these stupid, very inane, like, basic things people say every day that literally don't mean anything. Because, I don't know, I hear, what do women want? It's like, I don't know, what do men want? What does anybody want? I don't know. It's just like a question that almost is so opaque and stupid, it doesn't mean anything. It's like, so like what I liked about this was that it labeled it as that simple and that dumb. Is like, oh, I'm into horses, and I kind of thought that's what it was all about.
Yeah,
and revealing that to be as stupid as it is, and them kind of recognizing, no, we need Barbie too.
Yeah.
In fact, no, you know what? Let's let Barbie be in charge. Like, and so that I like that in the sense of it's, I guess, not exactly an an analysis of that, but just as the simplicity of that I liked about it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good choice. Yeah.
But I also did like the fact that John Cena was randomly in it, and just was like, okay. But
Mermaid Ken.
Also like the two Kens, Ryan Gosling, and then that other guy's name's blanking on me right now. Hang on. That they had that kind of red carpet moment that was really awkward.
Oh, right, yeah.
Simu Liu, that's right.
Yeah.
Or Simu Liu, yeah. That he was like, no, I'm not going to hug you. Get away from me. Like, it's just like, a very honest moment you don't normally see from people.
You saying that about John Cena just reminds me another reason Margot Robbie should be celebrated. She's a WWE fan, I know, because she's a big fan of John Cena and the WWE, and she, I think he was literally just like visiting set one day because they're buddies. He's I want to be in this, and they're like, oh, okay, get him made up, and that was kind of an impromptu appearance. But next up, we always like to celebrate things that are a little retro, obviously. So our next category is our favorite pre-2023 movie that we saw for the first time. So, Levi, you can go first with this. And Levi's
Harry Dean goes to The Blair Witch Project, which we talked about recently. I won't talk too much about it. That's a movie that, and honestly, this year actually was kind of tough to make a choice because
there
wasn't a whole lot. No, I was kind of surprised by that. Another one that I was close to picking was Reflections of Evil, which I've talked a lot about on here and written about. The Blair Witch Project, I mean, it's one of the biggest movies ever. I don't have much more to add to what we already said. It was my first time seeing it. It's a movie I was kind of running from for many years because of my fear of, and we just talked about it a while ago, but found footage movies and how that kind of gets under my skin in a certain way. And this did in certain ways, but also I just was so blown away by the simplicity of it and just how well made that it was that it honestly didn't bother me on that level that I thought. Just a really great movie in general. Nothing really to add.
Yeah,
I'll just kind of because we just talked about it recently a couple episodes ago. So when we had seen it, so yep, great. Blair Witch Project, great. As if anybody didn't ever tell you that, but
so my pick for favorite pre-2023 movie that I saw for the first time,
and your pick goes to
Streets of Fire.
Walter Hill. Yeah, that would have been one of mine as well.
Yeah. So Walter here.
You need to be Walter over here.
Walter Hill's one of those names that
you're right on the board.
I've seen things here and there for a while. Like I remember seeing 48 Hours some years ago and being kind of nonplussed by that.
The Warriors, I quite like.
Well, the Warriors was one of those movies that was a turning point that I saw, and I was like, "Ooh, this is a little better.
Yeah, that's good.
This is interesting." This is like one of those dudes rock movies.
Yeah.
I mean, and it just from frame one just feels like a rock and roll adventure, quite literally and figuratively.
No, I mean when the Diane Lane opening song hits, and that's just like literally what else you want in a movie. It's like this is it.
As it says on the Wikipedia page, described on the poster and in the opening credits as a quote rock and roll fable. The film combines elements of automobile culture and music from the 1950s with the fashion style and sociology of the 1980s.
It's kind of a Western.
The only downside, a lot of his movies have a Western.
It's very
influence.
John Carpenter in that way. It's kind of it's a lot like Escape from New York meets
a lot
Assault
of
on Precinct
filmmakers
13,
of that era were very, very interested in taking the style or aesthetics or settings of Westerns and kind of
Howard Hawks
refashioning
and John Ford,
them. Yes,
right.
And I just really love this movie.
Yeah.
It's one of those I want to see again. I got the soundtrack for it on vinyl after. It just, the only downside, the only flaw in this whole movie, and it would have made it 5 stars if they would have had it for me, was the Springsteen song, not in the movie.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite Springsteen songs in general, so I was like, when's it going to be? Oh, it's not here. But
yeah,
great movie.
Nothing I'll say about that too. This is a random detail, but I really, I'm kind of a fan of Fear, the punk band Fear.
Fan of the concept of Fear.
Yeah, well, no,
yeah.
And Lee Ving's in this. Anytime Lee Ving shows up, you got a movie already right there. It's like, yep, there you go. So he's good in this.
Streets of Fire is mine. Yeah. That will probably very likely be a movie we do on the pod someday.
Yeah, surely, yeah.
Some other movies I wanted to shout out briefly. The Great Dictator, similarly in a different way for you and Blair Witch. That's a movie that I had been saving for a long, long time. So I'm a big fan of Chaplin, and I finally cracked it open. It was actually around the time I was reading all those books on the Nazis earlier this year.
How did that go with that? Did that feel like a refresher or feel like a fraud in its own way as a version of like what the reality of that was?
I said this back when I saw The Great Dictator. That's probably, there's another, again, I think this is a big statement to make. I think the most tonally complicated movies ever made, period. Because it's very funny, but it's also about very serious, incredibly serious subject matter that we didn't even totally know to the extent to which it would be relevant in 1940 or 41
Well, I think
when it
he
came
knew
out.
how serious
But
it was,
it still has its finger on the pulse of what Nazism represented to the world in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say it's similar to what I said about Oppenheimer. I'd say it's one of Chaplin's greatest achievements. I think he made some better movies, but that is, again, I think it actually threads the needle and kind of is successful at what it's doing, which is just the fact that it's not laughable, I think, is or distasteful, I think, speaks a lot of it. Grand Illusion was one of those movies that I'd been wanting to see for a grand many years, and that was terrific. Wild Strawberries and Persona, 2 Bergman movies.
I've seen Persona. I haven't seen Wild Strawberries.
The more and more Bergman movies I see, the more and more like he might really be the greatest filmmaker ever made in terms of his aesthetic. Really feels like it drills down into the bowels of what cinema is and can represent. And I just think he's terrific.
A movie I'll mention just to throw out, because there's a lot of great movies he's made, but I really love that movie Shame. Is really great. That movie's like a deeply serious movie, and of course Fanny and Alexander. But yeah, Persona's good. I haven't seen Wild Strawberries yet, and I know we saw Seventh Seal years ago, and I haven't watched that.
I love that.
Again,
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah.
Next up, instant Christmas classic. Now this is something that might repeat year to year. I think it would be interesting to see. Okay, because there's always Christmas movies that come out in October, November, December. It would be interesting to see to how often we do get, quote, new Christmas classics. But we agreed on this one that the Harry Dean Award for Instant Christmas Classic goes to
The Holdovers.
Which, that was pretty
New
easy.
Alexander Payne.
That was pretty easy to figure out, you know.
Yeah. We just rewatched this movie, and we talked about it, pretty recently. We rewatched this movie with our family a couple nights ago. Yeah, and they loved it. And they were really into it. So,
and it's very much a Christmas movie, but it extends into the new year as well. I don't even know what to say. I mean, I feel like this is one of those movies that as you're watching it, you know this is going to be, at least for certain people, a new holiday classic, a new holiday staple. The story itself, pretty simplistic, but the chemistry,
a festive mitten.
The chemistry between Giamatti and there was
Dominic Sessa.
Sessa is terrific. I mean, and again, kind of, I think one of those things that, you know, actor of the status of Giamatti going up against this teenager who really, this was his debut in a movie, is staggering that it works as well as it does. We both really love this movie. It's definitely going to be kind of in our, if we made top 10s, I made one.
Yeah, also it's in my very high up there. Also, Davine Joy Randolph is really great in this too.
Yes,
we really liked her on
Only Murders
in the Building. I'm glad she got something else to be this way in, because that show's good, but it's been increasingly less so.
Yeah,
so it's good to see that be a little different. What I love about this movie too, I'll speak real briefly on it and then we move on, but with The Holdovers, is that it's a Christmas movie in all the right ways, because like you said, it has, a festive mitten, as I said, and it's all very Christmassy, you know.
Yeah.
But then they'll have, but then it's about like,
sorry, didn't mean
hang
to do
on,
that.
all right, I'm being called off.
No,
sorry,
no, I'm sorry.
I'm being played off. But that. The Holdovers is being played off.
I didn't know
on
that
overlapping dialogue right now. A festive mitten. I'm just thinking about that.
Yeah.
But it's about, and that's this is a typical thing people talk about with the holidays now. But loneliness at Christmas, and the people who don't have anybody, whether it be death or self-imposed loneliness. And kind of, what are those people that have to do that and deal with that at Christmas, and what does that mean about them? And kind of, it's like what I love about the movie is very funny, but also very deeply serious about a lot of things, and it's in that way, it's kind of the perfect Christmas movie. It's a lot like It's a Wonderful Life in that way. I think of it's about the good times, but also about the bad times, and about the intersection of the two.
The relationship again between Giamatti and Sessa in this is very hard earned. It does not come easy. I mean, they're like, you feel like you see him take one step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I mean, it's this constant dance they have. But by the end,
festive mitten,
like their last moment feels incredibly earned. Like you've been over the
more than most movies, that do
that relationship. So
yeah.
All right, now sorry I hit that earlier.
Done with that
but
festive mitten,
now our score of the year, meaning like film score of the year,
the Harry Dean goes to
Robbie Robertson.
Roger Rob.
Robbie for Robertson, Killers of the Flower Moon, which of course
everybody's been talking about.
Likely
Twitter.
will be his last film score because of his death.
And we'll be honest, partly that's probably why we chose this for him as well.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously, we talked about this back when he had passed away. His relationship with Scorsese goes back several decades. I mean, they've been friends and collaborators on a grand many projects. And it does feel fitting that this is going to very likely be among the last Scorsese movies, of course, we get. And that this is his last film score. We don't have Killers of the Flower Moon anywhere else on Celebrated with the Harry Dean, and we can maybe talk about why that is here in just a bit. But what about the score for you, Levi, kind of stood out as one of the most memorable or prominent of the year?
Well, like I said, part of it is a legacy award. We'll admit on that.
Even here at Overlapping Dialogue.
Oh, we're scumbags. Yeah, we'll do what
awards,
we do. Yeah. We were thinking about Roger Robb. We thought Robbie Robertson. No, it is really good though. I mean, it is a really good score. Normally, film scores are one of the most over-remarked upon aspects of movies. I don't know if you agree with that, but
go on.
Well, just because it's like. More what I mean, it's like when people talk about, I'll just sit and listen to this piece of score all the time. And it's like, I do that with certain things.
Yeah.
But I've been really doing that with certain parts of the JFK score recently because I've been thinking about it. But, I don't know. It's just one of those things people talk about, the score of this movie. I think it's all this is kind of
You see scores as more purely utilitarian devices.
As a music person... Aside from movies, as a lover of music, as a lover of what do you think? There we are with Fear makes another appearance, leaving appearance.
I might start playing you off actually if we're going to start.
Oh no, all right. But as a music fan, like I sit and listen to music. I sit and listen to music. Like music, and then like. I don't know. It's like
music that is designed to be its own.
This is designed to be in a movie,
right?
And I'm not saying that means you can't listen to it outside of that. I do that sometimes. Like I randomly go and listen to the Stephen Sondheim "Goodbye for Now" from Reds pretty often.
Yes,
it's just like a great piece of score.
I've got that, and also the last score of AI, the final score of AI at the end of that movie. John Williams, of course, did. That is among my favorite pieces of film score that I can. And then some of the stuff from
Blood.
Well, in general of Johnny Greenwood from the other PTA movies, including that. But.
Yeah, no, I mean there's great score. And most of it though to me, I'm like it's great in the movie.
Yep, because it's married to an image,
right? So I think that really worked for this movie though. To get back to it, I mean and also that as being what I liked about it is it being part of Robbie Robertson's identity as a rock and roll figure who also has Native American ancestry and kind of marrying those two totally disparate sounds pretty obviously together.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that famous moment in the movie that everybody's kept putting on Twitter, and what I think of most from the movie of the part where the oil's coming out of the ground and all the Native Americans are dancing in the oil.
Yeah.
And that score on top of that of being mostly guitar driven, like electric guitar driven, but also with the kind of percussion of Native American tradition. And I think that is a really novel, interesting. It stood out to me when I thought, what's the best music of the year, or best score of the year? That it was very clearly Killers of the Flower Moon. And that's not even the best thing about the movie either. I don't think exactly. But as far as from what we would probably normally pick of a thing, that was the thing that worked for me. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Again, I agree. I think that, as you said, his identity is Native American ancestry, and kind of being involved with this project, I think, gave it a degree of authenticity, but also it just works so well with the images Scorsese conjures throughout the movie. So I would definitely agree this is one of the best scores of the year. Do we want to give any epilogue of thoughts on Killers of the Flower Moon generally? I know we talked about it back when it came out, but I liked it better than you did.
Yeah.
But even me, frankly, I don't know what else to say. I'm one of the biggest Scorsese fans I know.
Yeah.
It's definitely not on the level of The Irishman, which came out a few years ago. And this and Oppenheimer, and I think we would both agree Oppenheimer deserves this more than Killers of the Flower Moon, have been kind of ascended as a consensus #1 film of the year. What do you think accounts for that?
Which isn't my...
Do you think it's just Scorsese taking on this subject matter?
Yeah, I think that's what... I mean, Killers of the Flower Moon didn't even make my top 10. It wouldn't even have been close.
It would make my top 10, personally, but not in the top 5.
That didn't even make mine.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. I mean, and to me, it's just not remained memorable. It just really... It's not something that I think about.
It does have some, like, character actors that popped up that are memorable, I think.
But I'm saying, like, it's not a movie that stuck with me like other movies have this year that I think back on and go, yeah, that was really great. Like, I just have immediately put that on the shelf, and it's right next to, like I said, The Irishman. And it's like, yeah, I really want to rewatch that. Or we just watched JFK again recently, and it's like, oh, yeah, The Irishman, yeah. And it's like... thinking about it. So that's what I'm saying. It's just it's a movie of a lot of bad circumstance, I think.
You would agree you'll give it a chance one day. And,
it's a good movie. I don't want to sound like I even hate it or don't like it. It's a good movie, but it just, for the pedigree that it was expected and has been awarded after the fact, I think pales in comparison to what that is, personally.
I would agree mostly with that, even though I liked it better. But we don't want to be haters. We want to be lovers. And this next award is for... Hold on a minute. Let me get my... Breakout Performance of the Year.
And the Harry Dean goes to...
Sabrina Wu as Deadeye in Joyride.
Yeah.
Did we talk about Joyride back when? I think we did.
I think we did a little bit at the time.
Yeah.
That's a movie that has also not been particularly memorable, but when I thought about this...
Yes.
I was like, oh, yeah, Joyride. That was really funny.
Yeah, we were like looking over the year and thinking about like movies that we wanted, or elements of movies we wanted to shout out. This was one that jumped out to us because we were a big fan of Wu in this movie.
I liked everybody in it, but she was really good in particular.
And I think, we've seen a little bit more recently this emergence of like the Asian American comedy. I feel like African American comedies have been a more prevalent tradition over the course of last few years. But the success of Crazy Rich Asians is now kind of propelling more and more Asian American representation in film, which I think we would both agree is very much deserved. And our best TV show of the year, actually, we talked about way back when, just spoiler, feeds into that a little bit. Mm-hmm. But this was, I think, a funny, albeit kind of forgettable movie on the whole. But she was somebody
she goes by they, them, by the way. I forgot to mention.
Pardon us for that, man. They are terrific in this. Kind of the, like, goofy member of the entourage that...
The ingenue.
That is, like, not given, like, as much, quote, character work to work with exactly, but is there to be a little bit comic relief. But nonetheless, Wu does, I think, a terrific job in that role.
And that's a big part of the role too, is that they come out as a they them and kind of that. But normally their performance would be just that one note, like, oh, they're the funny person or whatever.
And it's called Deadeye for a reason, because it has just like blank expression or blank stares throughout various points.
But they're really funny in that sense, but also that in the end they actually had this whole kind of other thing going on that they deal with. And that whole movie I thought was really pretty good. It's one of my more favorites of those type of movies in the last so many years.
So again, Sabrina Wu. Hopefully they'll be in even more things in the years to come.
Yeah.
And our next up is our performance better than the movie, which kind of very intrinsically says we thought a lot of them, albeit we had some maybe problems with the movie itself. Mm-hmm. Levi, you can go first. Your favorite performance better than the movie goes to
Charles Melton in May December, which we didn't get time to talk about yet, I don't believe.
Well, we'll kind of do that here in a roundabout way.
We love Todd Haynes. Hint, hint. Wink, wink.
All I'm going to say is our next episode is going to be 2 Todd Haynes movies.
Yeah,
so
we'll go ahead and say.
We'll make that clear.
I'm such a fan of Todd Haynes in particular. Ever since I saw... Well, I had seen... Yeah, we watched Carol, and I had seen parts of I'm Not There in the past. But when I was in college, I finally watched I'm Not There, and then some years later, I went back, I saw Safe, I think, and then from there, I was just like in love with everything about
I've only seen Safe
his
one
stuff.
time. That might be his best movie. I don't know. As far as the consistency and specificity of tone of that movie, I think is really, really strong. And I love a lot of his movies, but that one in particular.
Well, actually, no, I had watched Superstar at one point. If you've never seen that, that's a really fascinating, even whole conception of like a biopic about Karen Carpenter, but through Barbie dolls.
Yeah.
And that movie is hard to... You can find it on YouTube, but it's hard to watch because of it being a Barbie thing, and they sued him for it. I really love Poison also, which we'll probably talk some about at least soon. But the conception of that movie, of being an AIDS movie in the 90s, but through these 3 vignettes, all using these different styles of films and genres, I think is so genius, and it's an NC-17 movie, so it's like on another level in a lot of ways. But just such a bracing, gripping movie in a lot of ways to me, and very sobering. And then Safe he made after that, and obviously and on, and Velvet Goldmine, and Far From Heaven I think's really good, and of course Carol, and I'm Not There, and then he had, taken some time and he made Wonderstruck, which is kind of whatever. And then Dark Waters, which was all right. And then he made this, and... well,
also there's the Velvet Underground documentary.
Which is great.
Which we like a lot.
I love that. The Velvet Underground documentary is great.
But that was just different than being a narrative, exactly. But
yeah, but this movie was very confusing to me, very confounding in a lot of ways. I understood what it was about. I understand what the themes are and what he's getting at. My problem often was understanding why he was making this movie, first of all, and secondly, how do you want me to feel about this? I'm not really sure. And normally I appreciate that he questions and says, all right, this is up to you to decide. I felt like the subject matter of this movie was too volatile to leave up to the audience in its own way, though.
My chief criticism of this movie was the performance of Julianne Moore, which I genuinely like a lot as an actress.
And she's normally really great in his stuff.
Yeah,
so
I don't want to take away from that. But what I figured out when I was like, what's the problem with this movie in terms of a lot of the same things you just said?
Yeah.
It came down to the fact that we're supposed to think for most of the time that Julianne Moore is a harmless person.
Yeah.
Or at least have some
This is all, by
doubt.
the way, based on the Mary Kay Letourneau story about that teacher who had an affair with a younger student, just to say. And this movie's kind of about that.
I did really like the idea that this is about years later, we're getting ready to make a movie about this.
And Natalie Portman's actress going to play her.
Right, I do like that it's kind of at a different phase of the story. I did like that. But I think for most of the dramatic tension, especially, I won't say too much, but for the final twist to be as impactful as it is, we're expected to think that Julianne Moore is either a harmless person who's kind of thrown in the middle of this, or at least ambiguous about that. From jump one, I thought it was pretty obvious that Julianne Moore's character was a manipulative person.
Yes.
I don't think that was a mystery throughout the movie. No. And I feel like that dramatic tension does not work if we know from the very beginning that she is inherently manipulative, because then we're like 3 steps ahead of Natalie Portman's character,
right?
By that nature. But we overall did, I at least was intrigued by the movie. I don't know to what extent I liked it, but it's definitely, something that stuck with us. But in particular, we want to shout out Charles Melton in this, who plays the kid who grew up, the kid who she, had this affair with. who is now, obviously he's not all that old. I guess he's in his mid-30s, late 30s, mid-30s-ish, who's getting ready to send kids off to college. They'd already sent some kids off to college, didn't they?
No, this was their first. They were
okay. Yeah. There was another character that I feel like I don't remember. Maybe it was a relative or something.
No, it was that brother. I think.
So that's what I'm. Okay.
Yeah.
So getting ready to send some kids off to college, and it all comes down to that to me when I think about him in the movie. The scene he has with his son on the roof of the house.
Or no, I'm sorry. It was her son that she had with her original husband. That's what it was. Yeah, sorry.
But to me, that performance comes all down to him and his son on the top of their house as he's talking about how he feels he was robbed of his own childhood and was robbed of his own adolescence.
Smoking marijuana, that scene.
And his coming of age and the tragedy of that scene of this... Someone who's mentally and spiritually still a child who's in the body of an adult was a very... And again, that was very prevalent throughout most of the movie, but I think most especially with that scene. What about him sticks out to you in terms of what the movie's about and what he means to it?
Yeah, and I mean, he could have also been, best breakout of the year, too, in its own way, because he hasn't been in an awful lot of things that I know of.
I think he might have been in Riverdale or some other things, I think.
Yeah, but I mean... Also, his relationship with Natalie Portman I find very interesting. That was a problem with the movie, though, too, is when she kind of has an affair with him, and then's like, oh, yeah, whatever, though. And he's like, literally, what's wrong with you? And she's like, oh, whatever. That kind of didn't work for me because it was like, oh, Natalie Portman's evil, too. It's like, what? But anyway, I thought that scene he was really good at, in most of the movie, he's just very kind of closed off and kind of, opaque. But there's those moments where he really comes through. But yeah, he's really good in the movie. Everybody's been saying that, but the movie doesn't live up. The movie does not live up to his performance.
Yeah, he'll very likely be nominated.
The score of this movie is also very fascinating.
Yeah,
I mean he knows what he's doing. It's very soap opera, intentionally melodramatic. I mean, he as such a fan of Douglas Sirk, I mean, he very much knows exactly what the melodrama is and does it very well normally. Here, I felt like it wasn't.
Would you agree that the movie, if there was something modulated with that Julianne Moore performance or another actress, that would change some elements of the movie? I mean, I don't know if that would totally make it...
The movie's just kind of bland to me, though, too. It's just not a whole lot going on, so it's like... Okay, whatever.
But anyways, whether you win the Oscar or not, Charles Melton, that's one thing, but you've won your first Harry Dean Stanton Award, so you're Harry Dean.
Oh, first. Okay.
Huh?
First.
Yeah.
We're already
his
assuming.
First.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, we'll see.
I'm not saying he won't. I'm just saying.
Now, my pick for performance better than the movie... And the Harry Dean goes to, as it appears, Carey Mulligan
in Maestro.
So Levi's not seen Maestro yet.
Well, you say yet, as in...
Well, maybe not ever. I don't know.
But, and by the way, that's not a hatred towards the movie, because I know it's been getting a lot of criticism here recently. I just don't care. It's not anything like
I would
negative.
say, for the most part, Maestro is, for the most part, the movie that its critics are accusing it of being in terms of a kind of misguided biopic. I'm generally a fan of Bradley Cooper as an actor. I really liked A Star Is Born a few years ago, and this is only his second movie he's directed now. And, its depiction of Leonard Bernstein as a cultural figure, a lot of people have said that it's actually not even enough about Bernstein and his artistic prowess or his evolution as an artist. It's pretty much primarily about his relationship with Carey Mulligan's character who plays his wife. And I would actually say, well, that might be actually a good thing to be a little more focused of a biopic. Carey Mulligan, I thought for a few years, is one of our best actresses working. And she oftentimes gets stuck in these types of parts. I mean, whether it be, what was the movie a few years ago she was in with Jake Gyllenhaal, the Paul Dano movie? Wildfire? Or what was it called?
Wildlife.
Wildlife.
Yeah, it was about wildfires, though. Yes. Yeah.
Wildlife, which I think overall
novel,
was a really good movie.
It was good.
But it is like her part. That part for her is like woman who's mad about her domestic circumstances, like type of part.
Or even a movie like, I know you still don't like this. You have liked this movie less as the years have gone on. I still mostly like it. Her and Drive. I mean, she's really great in that.
Yeah.
I feel like better than that movie in its own way.
Yeah. And she's terrific.
Her
in
and
Inside
Oscar
Llewyn
Isaac,
Davis
especially. Well, then there you
Inside
go.
Llewyn Davis,
But I forgot they were both in that. That's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's another one too.
His name was
she's
Standard.
Really great.
Don't forget. In Drive.
Standard. Where's the deluxe version?
Yeah.
Wow. Man, 2011 was something. I tell you what.
And
y'all
then
that missed it,
the movie had problems, but her and Promising Young Woman from a few years ago.
Yeah, well, I know Emerald Fennell has gotten a lot of big criticism with Saltburn, and I know you saw that. And
I don't really have anything good or bad to say about it. I'm just like, whatever. I don't even care enough about that.
Yeah, but no, she was really good in
so,
Promising Young Woman.
I thought she was terrific in this. I would really love like a certain filmmaker to get their hands on her and give her the space that she deserves. I mean, whether that be like a Greta Gerwig, a more of a female director, or the certain women director,
Kelly Reichardt.
Kelly Reichardt.
She also put out a movie we didn't see this year called Showing Up that we missed.
So again, the movie was fine overall. Pretty. I mean, it's kind of to me the definition of like a low 3-star. You'd see, you're like, okay, yeah, fine, yeah, it's fine. Well made. There's actually some beautiful black and white in the movie. But
I got that impression from what I'd seen.
But I'd
say kind of like, I know it wasn't as volatile as this, but it looks kind of like Blonde.
Yeah,
it feels like to me.
It's not nearly as ugly as that movie is.
But like a movie that's very like, oh yeah, okay. It's funny that you characterize, and we did this at the time. We talked about it. It's funny to characterize Blonde as a real. Oh yeah,
kind of movie. Extreme as it
but
is,
no, that's what it is. It's very like, oh yeah, okay, all right,
yeah,
all right. But yeah.
So again, I really love her to have a starring role in something that she's not the second fiddle to someone else.
Yeah.
I would actually say Maestro to me has one of my favorite trailers of this year. I will say, which kind of sums up what the movie is, and you're like, oh man, that's great. Why don't I just watch that again instead? But my award goes again to my Harry Dean. First goes to Carey Mulligan in Maestro. Now,
next one is movie that surprised you the most. Kyle, you want to go first on this one?
Yep. Okay. Mine is
Harry Dean goes to
Infinity Pool.
By Brandon Cronenberg.
Is not a movie I really remotely expected to like all that much. I kind of went into it going like, just looking at the poster and being like, we were talking about this recently. We were not really big fans. We talked about it way back when of the new David Cronenberg movie.
Crimes of the Future from last year.
Was kind of a big fat bore.
That was a whole bunch of nothing, I tell you what. Yeah.
And just as a reminder on Infinity Pool, it follows a struggling writer and his wife on a vacation who, after an accident, discover the country's dark culture. I do not want to categorize this movie as a comedy because it is not, but there are some unexpectedly funny moments in it, and also tonally, I'd say the movie is like delighting in being very cutting and very dark and very nihilistic, but it was something that unexpectedly I've actually thought more about as the years gone on than I maybe even expected at the time. Again, Alexander Skarsgård, he's usually good in anything. He's quite good in this. Mia Goth, who can be a little hit or miss depending on what she's in.
Yeah.
She plays shrill person you hate that's evil really, really well in this. And so, again, it's a movie that I've unexpectedly thought a lot about as the year's gone on. I don't know if I'll rewatch it exactly anytime soon, but was something that I'm like, oh, Infinity Pool. That's something I would recommend to a certain type of person.
Yeah. Avengers Infinity Pool. Yeah, I liked it. I liked it less than you did, but it was good. It was very much its own thing, I'll say that. It felt pretty different. So
it felt like a trashy paperback that had an interesting cover that you pick up and go, oh wow, how'd they get away with publishing this? But Levi, movie that most surprised him, the Harry Dean goes to
Thanksgiving. And we talked about this pretty recently, so I won't belabor it either. This mainly comes from the fact that I was surprised by this movie because obviously it being about, or coming from that original source material of the trailer, which was so great. We've talked about that to actually be this interesting and this good and this well made. Another instance like the Bret Easton Ellis thing of, an Eli, I had never seen an Eli Roth movie, but to actually finally see one and go, that's actually
and
good.
Admittedly, probably
you know,
a much tamer.
Thing
than
definitely
his other things were.
Well, it's funny to call this tame because somebody literally gets cut in half by a dumpster. But yes, I know what you mean. Yeah. No, because no, this is tamer compared to some of his other stuff.
Yeah.
Even tonally.
Yeah.
Because his other stuff's just very dark and serious, but takes itself too seriously, I think, probably. Yeah, I don't know. I was just kind of floored by this movie in a lot of ways, and Patrick Dempsey in the movie also, without spoiling anything about it, was also very good. And just in general, I thought was a really pretty good little horror movie that didn't have to be a Christmas horror movie or a Halloween horror movie. It was a Thanksgiving horror movie. So.
And we're big fans of Thanksgiving as a holiday, so it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And again, I thought pretty satisfying movie also. Now, our next one is future double feature, meaning it has a higher likelihood chance than any other kind of combination of movies of being a future overlapping dialogue double feature. And so the winner for most likely future double feature,
Everything goes to
Past Lives and Poor Things, which on the surface, this is me going to try to spin a little...
Both P movies.
Yeah.
Past, poor.
This is going to be me trying to spin a connection
Past
that doesn't
things,
exactly...
poor lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just switch the... I mean,
Yeah.
What I think sticks out about, we talked about Past Lives when it comes out. That's one of those movies that's definitely among the best of the year also. The delicacy through which it is about these kind of overlapping relationships between these people is very delicate, very sincere, mixed with, this is the first time we're going to be really talking about Poor Things in any context, because we mentioned earlier we saw an actual double feature of that and the Iron Claw together.
Two movies about suicide, so there you go.
They are. But with Poor Things, I mean, it's a movie that's bombastic, that is in your face, that is all the stylistic things that Past Lives is not.
Right.
But on a pure story level, both movies are about women who are being pulled in all these different directions by men. Obviously, Poor Things is far more adversarial and hostile than Past Lives inherently is.
Yeah, I mean, like Past Lives would be like you speak in a language I can't understand. Is that one of the big things in that? Whereas Poor Things is like,
I must go punch that baby.
I must go punch that baby. Yeah, like, I mean, so
what do you think about these two movies as a joint unit? And then we can talk about Poor Things maybe a little more specifically.
It's interesting. I think it works. I mean, they're both independent movies. I like how different they are.
Yeah.
Past Lives is in my is my second favorite movie of the year. So I totally love that. We talked about that at the time, about what worked about that, and why it was so great. Yeah, I think that's funny that
it felt like the sort of
autobiographical
story that you almost like. It was almost too personal for you, and you feel like you're involved with this person's life and thinking, ugh,
right.
like that. Not that it's disgusting, but just like you're just in somebody's own particular experience in a very intimate way.
Right. And what I also, and I didn't say this at the time, I mean, well, I did. I said it's kind of a marriage between, or an exemplification of what I would call, and I'll say it again, it's kind of a weird way to say it, I admit, but Eastern thought of like Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, these Eastern religions depicted well on screen, that sensibility, because it's something that's been tried to be done a ton over the years, and some have been more successful than others. And taking that and then mixing it with this American sensibility of the kind of slow cinema of America, and also just the cultures of Korea and America coming together, because half the movie feels like, oh, I'm watching a movie from Korea, and then half of it feels, oh, I'm watching a movie from America. It does feel like it's those two things together in concert with each other, not like they're grating up against each other.
Yeah.
So that's just a very particular sensibility that I'm just totally in love with, and that I think is very unique.
Talk a little bit about Poor Things here.
Yeah.
Again, it's a movie that's very bombastic, but I think actually has a beating heart of sincerity to it. Which,
no, I said in my review, I think it's a very optimistic movie.
Yeah, which is very shocking to say, because you I mean, we were literally telling our parents, like, what's this movie about? And to watch it is one thing, but to say it all out loud and recount it, you start to realize how strange it all is.
A dog with the head of a duck.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making that up.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. That's just in the frame. It's not really remarked upon. It's just kind of there, you know.
And
it's
the
like,
final moment of the family's all now happy together, and
and what's going on?
To one of the characters just then, and
also Margaret Qualley is still kind of halfway brain dead and is there.
Yeah, getting better though, you know.
Yeah, it's like she's getting there.
Yeah.
It's like what? Yeah, it's
also the production design of this movie was terrific. Emma Stone, I've been a big fan of for a while. She's like Margot Robbie, where she's even ahead of her a little bit in terms of being around for a little while longer. But definitely one of our premier actresses working today that she's going to make a lot of...
You be tripping.
Off-the-wall choices.
Right.
I've not seen The Curse yet. I know that's been a very popular thing for a lot of people with her and Nathan Fielder and Benny Safdie working together on that, so I want to see that. But... again, this was a delight to see in a theater.
Oh, yeah, everybody loved it. I mean, everybody was laughing the whole time.
Yeah.
During Iron Claw.
Sorry.
I mean, poor things. Nobody was laughing during Iron Claw.
I still have a lot of affection for The Lobster and The Favorite, but this, again, combines his sensibility with an even grander scale of storytelling, which I appreciated.
Might still just slightly like The Lobster a little better than this, but I think this is probably his best movie he's made so far, as far as really going for it, whatever it is. In its own way. It feels like a very intimate movie, though, even more so than what his others have been. I feel like they're very much caricatures and like it's very ridiculous, but it actually feels like characters, whereas sometimes his other movies felt like words on a page that were spoken by human beings, theoretically. You know, this actually feels like, even though it has still that weird dialogue, it actually feels like these are people.
Yeah.
You know. And
Mark Ruffalo was terrific in the movie also. We should
say. They changed it.
Yeah.
I swear it was Stella in the trailer.
Yeah.
But Bella...
didn't you feel like you thought you were finally done with that character?
Yeah.
And then he just kept
he kept coming back
crashing in.
No, literally, especially when he was still in Paris at that one point. And it was like, are you literally still here?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. It's like,
yeah.
What do you want? Like, you know, I don't know. But and then when the final moment when he comes in is very like, oh, of course, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I recommend this movie highly to anybody, but
it would be in my top 10. Definitely,
yeah, it's in my top 4.
But again, you got to know the person before you recommend this to them.
Be like,
yeah,
like. If you think that the weirdest thing is that Willem Dafoe, who we haven't talked about him yet in the movie, that Willem Dafoe just like sits and eats and then burps these real big nasty bubbles that float in the air and then pop.
Yeah,
that's not even the weirdest thing in the movie.
No,
not even close.
Yeah. So Poor Things and Past Lives. Check those movies out in a double feature and let us know what you think. Now, next up, we've got TV show of the year. So we haven't really watched a lot of new TV.
No, because it sucks.
Well, there's just no time for it. Bigger than
well,
anything.
yeah,
It's
also
just too much of it.
Right.
Like,
I mean, yeah, that's the main thing. It's like that. There's really no time for this crap. I'm telling you. Like,
the last season of Succession aired this year.
Yeah.
That was a little more mixed than I even expected it would be. I know you jumped off the train last season,
done.
so you didn't see it.
Also, The Gilded Age we've been watching has been really good.
You know, that is just a consistently really entertaining show that, you know, we can have some debates about it, about like the historical decisions.
We talk about that every
and,
episode with our family.
But it's just it's hard to believe to say this about The Gilded Age, but it's a nice, comforting, cozy little show. It is, yeah. You know,
no, I actually
it
makes me want to go back and watch Downton Abbey, which I've always kind of wanted to do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I think would be really good.
And I do like the show's depiction of race is more prominent than I thought it would be.
No, that's a success.
So we do like that. But in awarding,
I mean, Nathan Lane in that show.
Yeah, we do impressions.
His version of a Southern person, I just love. But yeah,
TV show of the year of 2023.
Harry Dean goes to Beef, which we talked about.
Yeah,
already,
we did. And I think this actually shares a big similarity to what our film of the year is as well. In terms of, just to ever so briefly spoil what that is, both of these things depict the shrillness of modern life. I think with the startling accuracy, and not even just accuracy in terms of exactly what it is, but how it feels to live in the modern world sometimes. This is yet another, like, I think, evolution step forward for the depiction of Asian Americans.
Lee Sung-jin had made the show. It was Korean.
Then our stars were
Stephen Yeun and Ali Wong.
She's a comedian who's done... who's known for her stand-up, and then he's, of course, been an actor in a lot of various things. We were a big fan of Burning a few years ago. Most people know him from Walking Dead.
And he's good on that, from what I've seen. But, this is just one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Literally, like, there were some times where I literally couldn't stop laughing from one joke, and then another joke happened, and I just kept laughing, and it just kept going on and on and on. Like, it's funny to say that about a show. It's also deeply serious about what it's actually about, and like, but it's so funny.
And I love how it's progression into madness. It just one thing tops another thing, and then eventually you're at the places you're at by the end of the season.
You're in Vegas talking about this is new X-Men. Like, the shame is, by the way, that guy got Me Too'd. So
pretty awful things apparently about that.
But anyway.
Some of the best needle drops of the year too was in that show.
Oh yeah,
just a lot of great choices.
It was like some of the most obvious stuff too. It was great. It was like, oh yeah, do that. Yeah, like. Really good use of that Bjork song at the end too. That was like when it's like the penultimate episode where they were like driving away from the shootout, and there's that Bjork song, and they're just like gigging each other and crash. It's just like
I don't know what the future of this show is. I think they're maybe going to make more of it, but I would be totally content if this was just it.
Yeah,
I
mean, don't know. It'd be.
Well, do you have an interest in seeing more of this?
Yeah, I'd even say maybe even do another story. Like,
so almost just totally
like
different
an anthology,
characters. That would work
even,
too.
or maybe even like bring those characters back briefly, but just have totally different other stuff going on.
That could work.
No, it's just really great show. I've been thinking actually about rewatching it at some point because it was hilarious.
Yeah,
just so funny. I mean, I said there's that one episode in particular where they went to Vegas. I was just laughing the whole time. Every single thing that happens was like, wow.
All right, so I would say these
like
are
that Burger King bill.
Oh yeah, so he kept going to Burger King and going to this one place and eating and just
and he was on the phone hate calling everybody.
Yeah,
but yeah.
But again, wouldn't you agree that this show's depiction of rage feels...
Oh, yeah.
And the various forms of rage feels very... like something you don't see depicted in TV or movies.
It feels very real
often.
nowadays, too. Especially, I mean, and it comes from a place of privilege and then also a place of... I mean, I wouldn't say that Stephen Yeun is privileged.
Yeah.
Because he's like working to do these different things, but I think what is interesting about that character, at least the way that I saw it anyway, he has a certain amount of privilege actually, in an unexpected way, in the sense of that his parents worked hard to get him here, and then him and his brother screwed them over, or him and his cousin screwed them over out of their motel, but then they still get to live there while the family doesn't. And he has this business, and he's kind of like, and I'm not saying he's successful exactly, but he actually has far more privilege than he thinks he does in relation to her, and that's kind of an interesting. That's part of the whole, conflict of the show, but there's from that kind of privileged point of view of Ali Wong, and then a more like, I guess, blue collar working class version for him, which are both of Asian ancestry though too, which is.
And what I love is that this is about Asian American characters who, the variations of that. I mean, he's coming from more Korean American place, and she's kind of coming from a mix of Vietnamese, I believe, and then her husband was Japanese, and so the lack of white characters in this, that it felt so real that it just felt like they're in their own little slap bubble, even though that there are some white characters that come in and out.
Her name just left me. She was also in Joyride. She was the main character in that. She's in this too. She was really good in this. In Beef. Ashley Park.
Yeah. She's also even in Only Murders in the Building.
Yeah, she was in that. I forgot. And we were like, oh, she's really good on those shows. And then she was kind of just in this.
Yeah, so just background.
Whatever.
Yeah.
That's that whole kind of show's just real whatever these days. I don't know. But anyway.
All right. Now, we're in the nitty gritty.
Yep.
These are, by far, the three most prestigious awards that can go out. So this next one is the best use of Tilda Swinton in 2023. So usually Tilda Swinton's got like 4 or 5 projects to choose from. I think there's only like 3 this year.
And it's always the weirdest choices.
But it's always movies that are consistently among the most talked about of the year in terms of among cinephiles.
Before we begin, you just really remember her in like The Dead Don't Die. It's just like, what is this?
Yeah.
Because the whole performance is very confusing. And then she's an alien or something. I don't know.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway.
So, the best use of Tilda Swinton in 2023.
Harry Dean goes to The Killer. The new
David Fincher's
film.
latest Snorfest.
No, not that The Killer. Not that The Killer. That The Killer.
Yeah.
There's so many The Killers. Mm-hmm. But I'm sorry, go ahead. What?
I was going to say in David Fincher's latest Snorfest.
Yeah.
I actually did like this
Latest
movie
Snorlax.
overall. He is at a point for me, I mentioned this while we were watching it, he's entering Steven Soderbergh territory where they're 2 directors of a certain generation, of a certain age, that I quite like a lot of their work. But they seem as though they're entering a stage of
DGAF, I mean.
I'm going to make this movie to fulfill my technical interests. And where you're like, is there a story here? Or is there a story that I'm supposed to be invested in?
Yeah.
Now, I'd say Soderbergh's even more guilty
I'll
of
say
this than
arguably,
Fincher.
of course, Kubrick could be accused of having done that over the course of his career, but I feel like his movies always still had that extra spark, something there that made it worth it, beyond just that.
Oh, well, yeah, he was among the most technically interesting filmmakers in the history of cinema.
No, but I mean as far as technically minded,
yeah,
he was like them in that, but I'm saying there was always that extra something else.
Well, even the technical prowess
in
of those
that.
movies was even still more
extraordinary.
than
But I'm
them,
saying,
but
like,
yeah.
even narratively, there was always still something there.
Right.
Here, there's not. So,
because I've been pretty bored by the last few years of Soderbergh and Mank. I think I saw that movie like a grand total of 2 times, or
he
after
was
I've seen
55,
it. Yeah.
Kyle.
I just don't think about that movie at all. We didn't mention Gary Oldman, by the way, earlier with Oppenheimer as Truman.
I literally forgot that he was in it.
Yeah,
I'm not even kidding.
I mean, he's in one scene, but yeah.
Well,
I just mentioned Oldman as maybe.
Don't let that crybaby back in.
Yeah. But again, she's barely in this at all. I mean, she's really in like one scene.
I mean, this movie's literally
Fassbender.
Agent 47, the movie, by the way.
And all that said, I
Smiths.
actually like this movie fine enough, but I just kept asking it like, okay, so
why?
what? I don't know, like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Like, because again, Fincher's made some of the most impactful movies of American cinema since he's been making movies. Some of, not all of them are, but, and it's not even like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which is very like potboiler, very kind of. It feels like a genre movie for genre movie's sake almost.
Yeah.
It's still so well made. It's got Rooney Mara's performance. It's got Daniel Craig doing something other than a Bond movie. It's just got all these things that add
well, also,
gas in the tank
so
for what it is.
in your face, too,
yeah, right.
that it kind of justifies itself as just being, oh, wow, this is just like...
And it does have what feels like an inventive plot
Yeah.
to it. This is just very...
Like,
Hitman,
Arliss Howard is the final villain. That's the type of movie this is, as far as excitement. I love Arliss Howard, but oh, okay, that's it. That's all we need.
But Tilda Swinton does have one great scene in this where she's with Fassbender and she tells this kind of almost a parable of sorts about a bear being hunted in the woods, and this hunter who's basically trying to kill the bear, but then the bear keeps kind of getting the one-upsmanship on that, and
so the bear literally sodomizes him.
Yeah, and then the guy keeps hunting for the bear, and basically the bear is just like, "You're just looking for a good time, aren't you?"
Like, you're not out here for the hunting,
right? That's what she says.
Right.
But again, very small performance, but one that
I had a funny death.
Yeah, she was
kind
like,
of gonna turn.
Oh wait,
let me do it, and then he just shot her and killed her.
And she definitely was gonna do something.
Oh yeah, well she literally had like a knife on her, I think, or a gun or something. Yeah, so.
I did really like Tilda Swinton in Asteroid City as well.
Yeah,
it's kind of a smaller part, but it was one of, you could tell she was like one of these types of kids at Asteroid City that grew up and is doing the job that she's doing.
Yeah.
And she has kind of one scene in particular I think a lot about she's really good in. But nonetheless, Tilda Swinton. So if you just keep making movies, Tilda, you are guaranteed to get a Harry Dean every year.
Even if it sucks.
Yeah.
Whatever it is you did, it's like, well, you're in something.
Well, her taste usually is very, very good. So, she has another one of those careers that I feel like we're going to look back on and go, wow, she was in all of those movies. You know, a lot of Wes Anderson stuff, some Luca Guadagnino stuff, just a lot of big artists from this era.
Right.
But now, our final two categories. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty here, Levi.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is kind of our version of best director.
Yeah.
Filmmaker of the year.
And the Harry Dean goes to
Wes Anderson. Of course, he directed
Wesleyan Anderson.
Of course, he directed Asteroid City, but also, and we talked about this a while back, all the Netflix Roald Dahl films that he's made.
Right.
And we've been fans of Wes Anderson for a great many years. Wouldn't you agree, though, and we've talked about this before, but like that stretch from, say, like Grand Budapest up until, God, what was the movie he made just before Asteroid City?
Oh,
For any one of
French
us,
Dispatch.
Till about French Dispatch, we were like, what's going on here? I feel like we're going a little sideways.
Which I actually like that.
No, I do. Yeah. No, I love French Dispatch. I'm saying up until French Dispatch.
Sorry.
But since then, I'd say he's really been on a tear, kind of a second whirlwind or second renaissance, I'd say, because I love the French Dispatch. Asteroid City is it's definitely in my top three, probably my second favorite of the year. Have you had any other new thoughts about Asteroid City since you've seen it?
No,
I know we covered
it's
it back.
good.
Saw it.
I wasn't as big of a fan as you are of it, but I'd like to rewatch it. I think what worked so well about that was the because he knows what his style is by now. Taking the style and kind of making it even more obviously fabricated because it's supposed to be a theater set, or a stage, and so that adds this kind of different level to the mise-en-scene that he hasn't had yet in a movie, of being very manicured and everything very symmetrical and all that, but to like kind of drop the artifice of that, I thought was that's pretty different and pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah. Well, French Dispatch, I think, kind of had an element of that, too, in terms of these vignettes that he could spend time in this story, and then we'll jump to that story, and kind of the separation of those.
Yeah.
We obviously love, also, collectively, the Roald Dahl shorts he made for Netflix.
Mm-hmm. We talked about those.
Yeah. And so I think just, there's a lot of reasons why he maybe won this. I think, for us, between making a movie that just felt as accomplished as Asteroid City did, combined with these Netflix shorts, again proved that he's still one of our most vibrant, important filmmakers, and that just because he has a certain style doesn't mean he's not willing to innovate within that style or within those parameters. I think that makes him just still one of, again, as I said, the most vibrant filmmakers, most recognizable filmmakers. That again just proves just how important in a great many ways he remains as far as the film. Well,
you're playing yourself off.
Surprised only that's the second time that happened. Any other thoughts on Wes Anderson?
No, he good. He continued to be good.
So Wes, congratulations on your first, maybe only, who knows, Filmmaker Award, your Harry Dean Award. Now, this is the big one, Levi. This is the one they've all been waiting for. Overlapping dialogues. Film of the year.
And the Harry Dean goes to Bo
La La
is
Land.
Afraid.
Yeah. Oh, wait, no, that's I'm sorry. Bo is Afraid.
The Ari Aster joint. The Ari Aster comedy.
I frankly, when that came out and we loved it, I thought it was going to have more lasting power this time of year. I thought it was going to be something that was on more top 10 lists or even more recognition that it's received. Of course, not from the Academy Awards, but even just from critics and list makers. Right. I thought this was going to be something that
I've seen stuff about Nathan Lane in the movie. Like people saying, oh, he's one of my favorite characters in the movie or whatever. I've seen that, but other than that, I haven't really seen much.
what about this movie has stuck out to you as, and because this is something we both agreed on, because for me it was Beau is Afraid, Asteroid City, and Oppenheimer were kind of in this trio. Sure. And I think for me, what took Beau's Afraid over the top is it was just finally the Ari Aster movie that I really finally loved. Yes. And those other two movies I did quite love, but they're from filmmakers I kind of have this prior relationship with that I already like and have great fond feelings for. And this was like, finally Ari Aster made the movie that I think we were waiting on him that we saw the potential in with Hereditary a few years ago, and this finally kind of graduated to what this was.
Yeah, I love nothing more than to be wrong about.
Well, that feels great when you think you have somebody figured out and then they do something else.
Another version of that, like, for example, not liking Godard and then seeing Contempt and being like, oh my God, this is just so great. I love this. It makes it feel even better because it's so unexpected. Now, I did go into this movie, I'll admit, having this inkling. I was like, I think this is it. I think this might be his movie.
Yeah.
From beginning to end. And I'm not saying I even love every single section of the movie. We talked about that at the time. I didn't love every single little vignette in the movie. But the best part is that I didn't have to. Because there were so many. Yeah. And so I can think back to other ones or look forward to other ones. And even those that I was kind of more about, I've come around on more as I've thought about it over the course of the year. I think you have to recognize, though, at certain times, there's that movie that comes along that's like, wow, there was this movie when this movie came out. And there's so many of those throughout the years. I mean, different ones, but like that movie that's, wow, there was that movie that was so different and so big and so original and so itself. And there wasn't really anything like that this year. There hasn't really been anything, I think, quite like this since before the pandemic, I think, maybe. Of being that level of, wow, this movie.
Yeah, I don't think so,
and they only come around every so often, and I don't even know exactly the movie I'm talking about because I can't think of another example off the top of my head, but just those movies that are that bombastic and big and take that big of a swing. And, of course, that movie didn't make a ton of money and wasn't that wildly successful. It is strange to me, though, I will say, like you said, it's been very quiet for a while. I mean, when that movie first came out, it was pretty big and people were talking about it. And I think part of that is the fact that people had been more. What did it make, by the way?
So it had a budget of $35 million. It only made $11.5 million, which is made by A24, and I think it was A24's biggest budget as of yet.
I mean, I think they knew they were going to lose money on that. But I think part of the problem too is that I think Scorsese might have said some things about this, but this just goes to an example. Scorsese talked very highly about some of these other movies he had made. That maybe gives you an example to think about the way that has influenced people's view of Ari Aster movies, maybe. In a certain form of cinephilia, is the way that Martin Scorsese has championed them. Does it say anything about him there?
No, but I'll find us some quotes in a second. I know he called him one of the most important filmmakers in the world. I know he said in world cinema. He said
and so I know he said that in the past, but I think also people were so in already on Hereditary and Midsommar that when this movie came out, they were like, oh, it's just kind of another Ari Aster movie.
Yeah, Martin Scorsese praised Ari Aster as, quote, one of the most extraordinary new voices in cinema.
Mm-hmm. But, so we were more out on him for some time.
Yeah.
And so to us, it was more of a surprise and we were back in. But for others, it was like, either they weren't as into it as we were, or they were like, oh, okay, just another Ari Aster movie or whatever, or, we're happy, moving on, kind of thing. But no, this is the kind of movie that you wish all movies were, not in the sense of what it is about or what its style is, but
just the
that a movie can just slam into you and keep going and not care that you're there. And the movie almost feels like it doesn't really care whether you're even there or not. It's like the movie's going to happen.
I don't want to spoil nothing for anybody who hasn't seen it. I think we got into spoiler territory when we watched it, or we talked about it after it came out. But the very, very, very end of the movie, the camera stays on what has just happened as the credits roll.
Yeah.
And it's almost going, well, That's it. There's no more of this.
There's no more Bo. Bo is no longer afraid. Yeah.
This is it. What do you like? It insists upon itself in a way that flirts with pretension, but ultimately is a sign of just how bold and brilliant of a work I think it really is. Because I could see a version of myself who did not like that movie that would be so pissed off and angry and thinking, "Oh my God, what a miserable, awful experience that was." But instead, I opted in. We did what we often say movies should do: is we buy the ticket and we take the ride of what it is. And I was again transformed by it. It didn't change my life. It didn't change my perspective on life really, but it was one of those things that takes you in to a filmmaker's own neuroses and their own sense of imagination. I know he described it, Astor, as the Jewish Lord of the Rings. I think he's what he called it, which I think is very telling for what his ideas are. But again, it was something that you felt uncomfortable every single moment of the movie. You never felt like you had anywhere to hide. As an audience member, you thought like
unlike Skinamarink, it didn't have a moment where it kind of leveled out or kind of mellowed out and was like, "Oh, you're a little." No, it was a constant barrage of feces at the screen.
I think we talked about this when it came out. What would you even categorize this as a quote genre? What genre would this be?
I think it's I don't know. I think it's a drama, basically. I mean, or a fantasy movie in its own way.
Okay, so this doesn't mean everything, but on Wikipedia it says a surrealist tragicomedy horror film.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a horror movie ultimately too, but it's so many things. I mean, it really is something else. And what I liked was, and I said this at the time, what worked about this movie is it was kind of a shotgun blast of his interest rather than this one little let's talk about these Scandinavian cults, or let's talk about this. Oh, what do you know? A cult in Hereditary. Mm-hmm. Like it was about a lot of things. It was about fame. It was about mental health, just basic mental health stuff, which it didn't spend, thankfully, a lot of time on. Honestly, that's kind of what the whole movie's about in its own way that it didn't have to. About relationships between mothers and sons, and about just traveling in general, about
male inadequacy,
right? Just America in its own way, and kind of the chaos of urban living, and the pointlessness of pastoral living, and kind of just a lot of different things. I think the power of the movie for me is that it could literally have a section where it's like, here is this man's life. Watch this man's life. It is all but a stage. And it's like very meta, and it's almost breaking the screen and saying, you're here to watch this person.
Yeah.
This is all this big thing. And then it does that at the end, without spoiling it, where one of my favorite moments in the movies where it just cuts to a shot of people sitting in kind of semi-darkness, the audience watching what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's almost looking at us and saying, you've been sitting here watching this the whole time. Do you feel implicated in what's happening? And it's like, no.
And also, not to reveal too much about that, I do remember we mentioned this.
Yeah.
In the 11th hour, bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, out, and we're here. This is it. That Richard Kind appears into the movie.
Well, he had been in it on the phone, but
and he's like, basically, Bo in some form is on trial, and we all of a sudden get this video of like things that we have not seen whatsoever that are and all of a sudden injected into
him in a mall watching,
like hiding from his mom, and that's being implicated as a capital offense.
Right.
And it's just like, and just. I think when I first saw the movie and we got to those moments, I was just
laughing.
I was laughing, but I was like trying to figure out how's this, because it's one of those things like, this is a very special thing. We've talked about this with the end of The Return, with Twin Peaks. When you're watching a great work of art and you know the clock's running out, you know that we're in the final moments, and it's still throwing things at the wall, and you're like... And the boldness of that to say, to like challenge
Gravity's
you
Rainbow is a literary version of that.
Yeah, and you'd be like, Underworld has an element of that too. Where you're just like, what? And to inject all this here at the end, and then it's over, and you're just like, wow, okay, I guess I'm going to try to sort through all that. Another thing is too, when you rewatch this movie, which I don't, have you?
No, I haven't seen it again.
I went to go see it again in theaters, which. once you know where all the pieces fit, it does not become conventional, because there's
Right.
not much about this movie is conventional. But you just start to see kind of certain breadcrumbs going throughout. And one of the most exciting things to me, and I mentioned this too back when we talked about it, was that moment when he accidentally hits rewind on the TV and then it like goes back and shows previous scenes, and then he hits fast forward and you start to see things that you've not even seen yet.
Yeah.
And when you first see it, you see images that you cannot even begin to categorize or comprehend what they mean. But then you see the final shot of the movie after it's fast forwarded, and even in the moment where I didn't know where it was going where it would end, I was just so excited by the fact that I'm watching something that is beyond me, is ahead of me.
Right.
And I think, something like Oppenheimer or even Asteroid City, which are two movies that I deeply also loved in their own roundabout way, they still fit the confines of my expectations of what those movies were, in a good way. I mean, they were terrific and they were outstanding. I never knew what was going to happen next in that movie.
Yeah.
And I think a great movie doesn't necessarily always have to be shocking, but it is really valuable and enjoyable when it is. And so I think, again, and when we haven't really talked much about it, we mentioned it earlier,
but about certain things in this.
When we get to thinking about like what this movie quote means, I mean, you could go on and about that and go in all kinds of different directions. But again, its depiction of the shrillness of modern life and the hostility of modern life is something that I'm going to walk away from thinking about in terms of what it means in the film landscape.
I wanted to mention two things quickly that before we talk about the audience experience one more time with this movie,
which only enhanced everything else about it.
That was where America was in the Simon and Garfunkel song in that theater at that moment. That's America. That's what America is at a deep level. I think. This movie was so, and like I said, you never expected what was going to come next. Like the fact that like there's the part where he's having to look for a new plane ticket. And he goes, and there's just the shot of him sitting at the computer, and there's just a shoe slammed through the screen. Nothing's remarked upon about it. I remember we both just started immediately laughing in that moment, just like, wow, this is so hilarious.
Very close to that is when, just to interrupt for a second, is when he gets called about what happened to his mother, and it's Bill Hader's voice on the phone, and it's like this great bit of voice acting going on. And we know what happened, but he's like, hang up and call me back and we'll see if it's the right number. And there's just this this anxiety moment, and then he calls back and it's
the
just
number.
like exactly what we thought. But
well, and also
I don't know if you're gonna mention the guy in the bathtub.
That's what just the moment of like he goes and he gets in the bath, and then
after
that
his
guy,
whole place has been trashed and like looks like garbage,
up there, and he falls, and the music is so oppressive, and it's just like it's just so like literally, even within that, like if you could even imagine that this is the real world, anything that happens in this movie exists in the real world. That is the single most important thing happening in the world in that moment. Like, nobody could ever tell me otherwise. Like that literally proves like this is life or death right now. It's like so, but it's not. That's what's so funny. It's so over the top. Another one of my favorite moments too is like when he's running out and he's lost his key, but he's got to go over and then he's got to go drink the water with the pill, but then he doesn't have a card to pay for it, and he looks back and there's the shot of the people walking in the door literally like zombies is the way they're moving, and it's like just so like wait what, it's like so disorienting.
Someone like look back at him
and
too.
Like,
there's one guy
I'm going in. Like yes. And then, of course, we can just talk about moments from, because that was overall my favorite section of the movie, was the first kind of part of it.
Yeah.
But that where he
mine might be the like Nathan Lane and Amy Ryan.
That is
stuff,
pretty good. Yeah.
But
and also, by the way, the fact that they're like son's friend that they took in, who's like got severe PTSD, and that he disappears from the movie for a while, and then he comes back and he's like shaved his head and he's like chasing after him, and then of course what happens to him in the end in the attic space, which
there's no room for him in the end.
There's no room for whatever that is in the attic either, which is his father. Which, wait, is that his father, or is the guy that looks like Hitler his father, by the way? Another whole question mark I think about in that movie all the time is, who is that man? Mm-hmm. Who is he? But that, where...
Because you got to think, would he be lying about all that if he didn't know at all, like, what it was?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But, anyway, but earlier in the movie, that part where... It's probably my favorite scene in the whole movie, where he's going to bed. Somebody knocks on the door, leaves a note. Can you turn the music down, please?
Yeah. He's not playing any
He's
music.
not doing anything.
Yeah.
Goes back in. I asked you to turn it down and you turn it up. and then that makes you think, wait, are they that's literally what happened later in the scene, or later in the movie, where they come in and trash his apartment. That happens in the future, but it's like they're reacting to it then. It's like, what? Is this just stuff like that really makes this movie, like I said, so unpredictable in every way. It's just wild. Now, to talk about the audience experience. We've told this story before. We'll go through it again very quickly.
Now, wasn't it about a third of the way into it?
Yeah, it's about an hour and probably 15 minutes
during
in.
that Amy Ryan, Nathan Lane stuff,
right.
I remember.
This old couple comes in. They can barely even make it.
Yeah.
Like, the lady's very old. They're both very old, but she has mobility issues, clearly. It's taken them a long time to walk in there.
They're very clearly in the wrong theater.
I think
they're not going to be coming in to see this.
Right.
They're not.
I would think not. They go to the wrong theater. Thankfully, no one's there to... Obviously, at this point, it doesn't matter whose seats they are, because no one's there. They sit down. I understand at this point by now that it's going to take too much effort for them to stand back up and leave. Yeah. So they sit there and watch the whole movie.
And laugh here and there and chuckle.
They're having a good time. It's not like they're angry.
But they're not, like, asking any questions. You know, this kind of actually does, like, fulfill the idea that, like, you can kind of just walk in at any time and just join the ride. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
it
obviously,
doesn't really matter.
Yeah, they just walked in.
Right. And there's multiple instances of things they said. Probably my favorite of all of them is in the flashback sequence. One of my favorite sections of the movie, too, when he was a child and kind of all that stuff.
It's like on a cruise ship or, you know.
And there's the little girl runs down the hallway, knocking on doors, screaming, "There's a dead man in the pool." She screams it at least 5 times. Shot of dead man in pool. Looks like Sid Haig, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Clearly, she said this many times. The lady, no source of comedy, no source of humor, no source of satire.
Self-awareness.
Self-awareness. Says, that man's dead. You literally almost lost it. It was like, yeah, I mean, literally
what
that was
gave you
screamed.
That idea, yeah.
That was screamed 5 or 6 times.
Yeah. But I think the granddaddy of them all is later in the movie when Bo is naked.
I don't even know how to describe that scene.
Something shocking happens.
Yeah.
And, well, from the whole movie. But, I mean, like something crazy happens.
Yeah.
And a revelation is made about a presence of a character that was not believed to be around. And the guy, the older man, says, "Get your clothes on, boy."
Also, they had, and this was, also another moment, and this was earlier in the movie. This was like not long after they walked in at this point. It was during the Amy Ryan and Nathan Lane section, where she takes the sword off the wall and chases him with it.
Yeah.
He said she's going after him with a sword.
Yeah.
Just really, it was something else to be there. I mean, with those people in that moment. Like I said, that was America. That's what America is at a deep level.
Yeah.
Is this sense of having no direction of where you are, no inclination to leave, and willing to just go along for the ride of the madness and the chaos.
And not really understanding it, but
not really caring.
Don't particularly like
care. I don't care. Yeah. It's all a joke. It's all it is.
Yeah. I'm sure Ari Aster would love that story if we told it to him.
Yeah. He would believe it, too, in a certain sense. I mean, you can't make a movie like this and not be... Because, I mean, we compared this movie a lot to Inland Empire at the time as well, as far as, like, a movie's own digressions into itself and kind of, like, we're not really sure what this is.
This is a lot more focused than that.
It is, but, like, we're never really sure what this movie is, and it kind of breaks down at a point, and the narrative kind of just... the narrative ends before the ending of the movie at some point. We're not really sure where.
Yeah.
Sort of. It kind of just like then the movie's just kind of happening. I can't ever think of anything more refreshing than that. By the way, where it's just like I don't know, like But you can't make movies like this and not have an awareness of how weird America is. Like, I mean, I say that about David Lynch. It's the same thing. You hear stories he tells about experiences he's had in life, and you're
I think we called him like a version of the next David Lynch, not in the sense that he's going to have the same style and exact same interests, but in terms of
even as good of movies either.
Right, but he is definitely operating in this space where his movies can be seen by enough people, and still be as weird and idiosyncratic as they are, which again speaks well of him. So, Disappointment Boulevard, as railheads know,
it all goes back to the fact that it was originally Disappointment Boulevard and Moondog, not the Beach Bum.
Yeah,
but Zac Efron really good in the Beach Bum. I wanted to say that earlier when we talked about him. I forgot about the Iron Claw.
So, Beau's Afraid. Check it out if any of this sounds like of any interest to you, if you've not seen it already.
I don't know how you couldn't be interested at this point. Literally the things, like, we haven't even scratched the surface of the stuff that happens in this. Like, I mean.
Again, I remember, as we talked about at the time, seeing it and being like, wow, we really just saw something powerful and something that's going to last, I feel like. So, that about does it for the very first Overlapping Dialogue Harry Dean Awards.
Yep.
So, next time...
We should have got played off on that. So.
Yeah. Next time, we're going to get back into our double features. Jeff, what have we got next week?
Stay tuned for scenes from our next episode.
You're Kurt Wilde?
Yeah. Who the hell are you?
I'm a journalist from the Herald. You were at the concert? It's just funny, because I was trying to contact you, actually. About a story I was doing about an old friend of yours. Brian Slade. I was trying to find out what actually happened to him.
Look.
I mean, before he became such a mystery.
Look, man, I don't know who you've been talking to or what you're after here, but...
What? What?
Listen, a real artist creates beautiful things and puts nothing of his own life into them, okay?
Is that what you did?
No. We set out to change the world. Ended up just changing ourselves.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing. If you don't look at the world... Well, I guess Nanny got what he wanted.
It's quite a pin you got there.
Oh, yeah.
Is it old?
Possibly. Belonged to Oscar Wilde. So I was told by the person that gave it to me.
Thank you. Why do you think you were booed at your recent appearance in New England?
Well, I figured there's a little boo in all of us.
Is it true you no longer sing protest songs?
Who said that?
I didn't say that. I just, I read somewhere that you no longer do the protest thing.
Well, that's all I ever do is, protest.
Mr. Mayor, do you have a message?
Do you?
I mean, are you trying to accomplish anything?
Am I trying to accomplish anything?
Are you trying to change the world or anything?
What, am I trying to change the word, did you say?
You know, Are you trying to push your idealism to the people?
No.
Excuse me, Mr. Quinn. Perhaps you could tell us how many people who labor in the same musical vineyards in which you toil, how many would you say are protest singers today? That is, people who protest against the social state we live in.
How many?
Yes. Are there many?
Yeah. I think there's about 136.
Mr. Quinn, Keenan Jones from Culture Beat. As someone symbolic of the protest movement among young people, some have questioned, given your latest recordings, whether or not you still care about people as you once did.
Yeah, but, you know, we all have our own definitions of all those words. Care and people.
Well, I think we all know the definition of people.
Yeah. Do we?
Well, is it your belief, then, that folk music has perchance failed to achieve its goals with the Negro cause or the cause of peace?
You know, saying cause of peace is just like saying, just like a hunk of butter. You know, I don't know how you can listen to anybody who wants you to believe is dedicated to the hunk and not the butter.
I'm not sure I follow.
You know, I didn't come out of some cereal box. There's no one out there who's ever going to be converted by a song. There's no Phil Oakes song that's going to keep a movement moving, you know, or a picket line picketing. His songs acts of personal conscience. Like burning a draft card or burning yourself. Doesn't do a damn thing. Except disassociate you and your audience from all the evils of the world. I refuse to be disassociated from that.
As we said earlier, we want to stop our own Todd Haynes slander. Yeah. Apologize by.
Well, I don't apologize because he's the one who did it.
I know.
I'm just saying, like, you know,
talking about two of his music-centric movies, Electric Goldmine from 1998, and I'm Not There.
Electric Goldmine, Velvet Goldmine.
I did say that. Yeah, Velvet Goldmine. I'm
Electric Goldmine. Yeah. Now that's interesting right there.
Velvet Goldmine. I'm sorry to say. Yeah.
Don't touch this gold mine. It's electric. Wiggy, wiggy, wiggy.
And I'm Not There from 2007.
I loved it. I swear we'll get to actually talking about this. I would love to see a movie where he uses electric slide in it at some point.
But in a deep,
No, but like seriously, it's like the use of "Come Sail Away" in Virgin Suicides. Like that level of like, wow, we're really doing this. Or Freebird in Three from Hell kind of thing, you know. But,
Velvet Goldmine is.
When are they going to do that with Soulja Boy? I wonder. Like, what movie is that going to be? I'm sorry. Anyway, before we get to that, I want to ask you in general. What do you think is so great about Todd Haynes? And that's kind of a crazy question, but because it's so obvious. But I don't know. Like, what speaks to you about his movies? Why are his movies an integral part of modern American cinema, just in a general way, or world cinema even?
I think is because a lot of artists who exist in the avant-garde are content and willfully stay there. They don't want to stretch themselves in any way. They want to be what they are, be idiosyncratic and be confrontational and be hostile. What I love about his movies are he finds a way to talk about very dense, deep things with stories that most average people could put themselves in.
Yeah.
Now, some are going to be more obvious, like you mentioned Poison earlier. That movie's not going to appeal to everybody.
I don't think I'm Not There would either.
No, not exactly. But
most of his other movies do.
Of him, there's a certain normalization of queer cinema too that I think he's a part of and also that, you know, he very clearly has certain interests, but he always manages to mold himself to whatever the narrative demands.
Yeah.
Which is a very tricky thing to do, I think, of somebody who's got a very discernible style or interest. But Velvet Goldmine is kind of his take on the glam rock era.
Yeah. Not just David Bowie, but also
Bowie and
the Stooges, but Mark Bolins and T-Rex and Roxy Music and just the whole Lou Reed even and Velvet Underground in a certain way.
Yeah.
yeah.
The thing that I've mentioned this before to you, I know, the thing that always sticks out the most to me about the movie is Christian Bale's character of this journalist who's kind of, the frame story is that he's kind of going back and trying to piece together the steps and the pieces of what that movement meant, not only objectively, but to him.
Yeah, the rock star Brian Slade, who kind of tried to fake his own death, which came out, and then he disappeared. And, like, it's literally kind of a what happened. I mean, it's very much a Citizen Kane. It's been compared a ton to Citizen Kane.
Yeah, it's true.
Like you said, though, the difference is that the movie becomes, like how Citizen Kane is not really at all about the guy who is investigating. This movie very much becomes about, it's actually really about Christian Bale as a young gay Englishman falling in love with glam rock. I mean, it's the scene that everybody talks about, and we've talked about it a lot, of where he walks up to the TV where his parents are there and says, "That's me," pointing at Brian Slade on the TV, and then he does this really, like, vulgar or sexually explicit thing, and they look at him, like, and he's kind of like, "Oh, I just admitted that," and then, and like that's what the whole movie's about. Ultimately, right there is like it seems very obvious, but it's just so well done in that way. But yeah, just such a and that's doesn't even go into the quite literally supernatural aspects of this movie, which I find so fascinating and hilarious. I'm just literally like, what? Like, literally the opening of this movie, when I first saw it, I just literally burst out laughing. I was like, there's no way this is happening right now. Like, you know.
Yeah.
But what are some other thoughts you have about this movie? Because I think you like this movie even more than I do. And I love it.
I think because I think it was after, it would have been after I saw Safe, which again I really deeply love.
Yeah.
And the quietness of that movie, and then this movie is like very clearly big, loud and you know, and just I remember really responding to the range that Haynes had to go between those styles, and to, you know, I'm a big fan of like movies or books, and you got to be very delicate with this, but that take real life people and kind of turn them into characters in a story that didn't exactly happen. Because I think sometimes we scratch the itch in a way that straight adaptations of people do not always do. But you want to make clear that that's what you're doing, that you're not trying to depict a definitive version of. And in that way, Blonde was, I think, a very specific take on Marilyn Monroe that was not exactly going for reality. But I really just like how that plays with these that era's archetypes and kind of refashions them into something that
because it's also about
wildly creative.
80s rock and roll music too, which I'm very interested in the sense of that commodification of those earlier rock stars, which is kind of what happened to Bowie. But I actually really like the 80s Bowie. It's not exactly my favorite Bowie, but, well, in the sense of him as a pop star, I like a little better than as a rock star, which some people would say, what's the difference? And I'm like, well, literally is what the way he presents himself. I liked a little more than his glam rock version of himself, but I felt the glam rock music was better. Ultimately.
I didn't know this. I was just reading, it says, director Todd Haynes requested access to Bowie's song catalog along with his personal blessing to make the film, but Bowie refused, saying that he intended to make a similar film about the time. I guess that didn't really ever happen, but
that sounds like a respectful enough denial, though. Saying, I want to do my own thing with this. I think the movie's better for being this, though.
I agree.
And also just the fact this is his, like, studio movie. Just think about that. This is your studio movie that you go with, because Safe was relatively independent, I think. This was a Warner Brothers movie, wasn't it? Or
Miramax.
Okay, well, yeah, but
still in
like
the 90s. In the 90s, Miramax was one of those things that actually ended up in the multiplexes. I mean,
and this movie didn't make money. I mean, it wasn't that big of a thing, but I think about this movie a lot. This and Poison probably are the movies I think about the most with his. And this is a movie that I think is just really something else. Speaking of something else,
I'm not there. I feel like, a lot of people, including us, celebrate how great 2007 was as a film year. This movie kind of has fallen off the attention span of a lot of people in celebrating this.
Still as
and
great
I would
as
say
it is.
I'd put it above a bunch of movies.
Which
that
is
people
strange
probably
because of
celebrate
how
that
beloved
year.
Bob Dylan is. You'd think there'd be more about that, than
I think
there
for
is,
a lot of people, similar to what we just said, it's a pastiche of Bob Dylan intentionally, of trying to answer and figure out who all these personas of Dylan are and how they fit together. That there's probably a lot of people that are like kind of a head scratcher. They're like, I don't really understand what this is supposed to be saying or what it means. Even smart people will look at this and saying, I don't understand what this is, and kind of shrugging at it. As a big fan of Bob Dylan, and I saw this movie before I went more into Dylan, but I remember being like, wow, this is just something weird and interesting, and how, for the most part in the movie, the different versions of Dylan exist on their own terms, but then there's like the Heath Ledger's character playing the Christian Bale version of Dylan that's in the movie.
Yeah, this is another thing. If you actually tried to explain this to someone who hadn't seen it, they would literally be like, I had no idea what you're talking about. Like, it would be so confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See how Wikipedia does its best here. An experimental biographical film, it's inspired by the life and music of American singer-songwriter Bob Dylan, with 6 actors depicting different facets of Dylan's public persona: Christian Bale, Cate Blanchett, Marcus Carl Franklin, Richard Gere, Heath Ledger. This was the final movie to be released in his lifetime. And Ben Whishaw. A caption at the start of the film describes it to be, quote, inspired by the music and the many lives of Bob Dylan. It's the only mention of Dylan in the film apart from the song credits, and his only appearance is in concert footage from 1966 shown during the film's final moments. So again, it's basically, Dylan very famously has all these various eras and personas that he himself wore, and it's trying to almost be this kaleidoscopic vision of how do they fit together, how do they stand apart, what relation do they hold with one another, and also like almost beg the question, what's your favorite era of Bob Dylan? Because it's kind of depicting a lot of these different things.
What is your favorite era of Bob Dylan? Yours is the 70s Dylan, right?
Like Rolling Thunder Review. Yeah. I really love that documentary, but also the sound of his music during that time is a little more openly rock and roll sounding. I really love. But after that, I'm a little more hazy on him. I'm not going to act like an expert on kind of.
You're not an Empire burlesque.
And that doesn't mean that I don't. Doesn't mean I don't want to hear that stuff.
Right.
I'm just not as familiar with it. And I really. Oh God, what's the documentary that was made about Dylan?
Oh, No Direction Home.
That's the Scorsese documentary.
You're talking about which one are you talking about?
The black and white one that was
made.
Don't
Look Back.
Don't Look Back. That era of Dylan, I like the music, I deep down kind of like it, but at the same time, he's being intentionally obtuse to the point of make me roll my eyes, even as a fan. And Cate Blanchett plays that era in this movie, and I'm sure that was
Jude Quinn.
Yeah, one of those things that raised eyebrows of Bob Dylan being played by a woman. And I was even watching in that scene various queer aspects even of that about his cigarette being lit by a woman, and there's an attraction that is happening there between Blanchett and that character.
The Beatles make an appearance during that section. Very interesting.
So yeah, but then in the movie, my favorite sections are the Christian Bale sections because I really love his take on it, and
the way he sits as Dylan and talks, he's like James Dean or something, sitting a certain way. I guess my favorite version of Dylan in the real world is the
metaverse.
Is
this is entering the spot, entering the Dylan verse.
Highway 61 Revisited is just far and away my favorite Dylan album. I just love everything about. I think is just amazing. I mean, those are the songs I think about the most. In the movie,
one I was talking about too, my version, that was Blood on the Tracks era.
Right. That's also but in the movie, I'm really fascinated by. It's funny we're talking about this stuff. We should probably talk about it next week or next time. But probably the Heath Ledger stuff I find so fascinating, and what that is. And that's also about one of his divorces.
That's among the more different. I think that's one of the more creative elements of the movie is that conception within all these other things. I think some of the more creative
his
aspects
blues
of it.
stuff I find very interesting as far as being like the Woody Guthrie part of himself. The Richard Gere stuff is kind of like more disposable, admittedly. I'm interested, but I will say this about that. If you're confused about this movie, listening to what we're talking about, and you're like, what? I don't know what's going on here. The part in this movie where it locked in, for it finally like clicked for me in my mind of why this was great, was in the most random scene. You may remember this. It's in the Richard Gere section of the movie where there's that guy in like this real weird garish face paint with like a cowboy hat on, and he's singing this song in this like town square, and there's all these people there. And I was watching it, and I was just like, what is going on?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was like, this is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, I don't even know what this is, and I love it. It's like, well, why is this happening? Why am I watching this? Like, and it's stuff like that, and I think that's what works about Haynes' movies, is it's like, it all seems very like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever, but it's those touches like that just, you don't know why, but it's like, it's these things that live in the mind, and get under your skin and penetrate your sense of being that make his movies great, I think. And that's what's so great about this, is it's like, it's about Bob Dylan, and I'm not going to act like I said, I called him his own superhero earlier. I'm not going to act like Bob Dylan is this like super heroic figure, more than a man, a god or something, I'm not going to say that. But like, this is the type of movie to be made about somebody like him, who is so many things to so many different people, and even so many things to himself. And he's somebody who's clearly tried to reinvent himself over the years and say, I'm this person now, I'm not this person, now I'm this person again. I've always been this person, I've never been this person. And somebody who's very clearly, I wouldn't say they're not comfortable in their own skin, but they're constantly questioning who they are. That's the type of movie that needs to be made about somebody. And you can't do this with everybody, but it's a really it's almost the conception of a movie that was done once and you can never do again.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully it was picked for the right person and by the right person.
Yeah, we can review this next week, but Dylan's response I think is pretty interesting. Yeah. It says in September 2012, Dylan commented on I'm Not There in an interview published in Rolling Stone. When journalist Mikhail
I love, by the way, it's 5 years later. It takes him that long to get to it. But
asked Dylan whether he liked the film, he responded, "Yeah, I thought it was all right." Do you think that the director was worried that people would understand it or not? I don't think he cared one bit. I just think he wanted to make a good movie. I thought it looked good, and the actors were incredible. Very Dylan-esque
there you
response.
go. I mean,
so he was happy with it.
Well, if he's happy with it, then everybody should be.
Jay Hoberman, The Village Voice, said this was the best film in 2007. #1.
Would you not find it so strange, by the way, if you were Bob Dylan? I'm sure Bob Dylan finds everything in the world strange, but like, wouldn't you think, just from his perspective, you're watching this movie about yourself?
Yeah.
And
you're being played by a black boy,
a
child. You're being played by like a woman. You're played by Richard Gere.
Yeah. You're being played by a man who's playing another man's version of you.
Well, I think next week we also need to dig into the Ben Whishaw section,
because that's not as much of it.
Odd.
Yeah, it's more the poetic section of the movie.
Yeah.
The poet. It's like, all right, that's enough. But imagine though you're sitting there and you're watching that.
It has to be very weird.
And you're like, this is weird. Like, this is so strange.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna go get on my crotch rocket. Like, this is Levi.
Well, he should stay away from motorcycles, but
that's true.
Take care. God bless.
Thank you very much. So nice. Goodbye.